Well, everyone can hear me. I've managed to drop my earphones down the front of my shirt, which is very professional. Everyone, hi.
Incredible.
Yeah, we're doing it. I'm here, and Justin is here. Hi, Justin.
Hello, I'm Justin. I'm here.
Justin's here. Once again, we're joined, not this time, you're not here by sheer force of will, because we can confirm that you definitely do exist and people can see you in some form.
Yeah, I'm not Omega from the Three Doctors. No.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you're not here this time by sheer force of will.
Yeah.
We've managed to get you. Admittedly, we've frozen you in time because if I tease everyone in the corner, see, there's Justin. He's just right next to me there. See, look, it's Roz. Yeah. Hooray! Looking pensive, sat in a chair. You're talking without moving your head or any part of your body.
It's true. It's
yes,
true.
Exactly.
I've been practicing this for years and years.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Let's crack on. Everyone's here in the chat. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. We have lots of people joining us already, which is very exciting. Tonight we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the fact that actually it's a nice companion to your previous episode that you did with this, but we'll get to that later. U.S. railroads can be bad, actually, with Justin Roczniak, of course, of Well, There's Your Problem podcast fame, and also of you've been doing the rounds. Actually, you've been doing quite a few bits and pieces recently on various places, talking about the very subject we're going to be covering.
Oh yeah, what I'm doing is using a labor action to expand my brand cynically.
Hey, don't we all? The content machine must churn onwards.
Yes, exactly. The slow wheels of content will move.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But before we do that, I must desperately grab my Wacom, which has just fallen down the side of there. Oh my goodness, why is this happening? And look at the COVID stats. Because it's always interesting. We at the start, pretty much every episode since this started, given that this whole series started because of COVID and boredom. We've been looking at the ridership statistics across cycling, across the railways, across kind of private vehicles like cars and taxis, and then across bus services outside of London, and kind of tracing them along. And so we've got this sort of trace here so the green one at the top is cycling, which Roz, you should be able to now see on your screen.
Right. Yes.
Green one at the top is cycling. We've got this red one is kind of cars and taxis, which has basically been like back to normal for ages. The pinky one is for anyone who's colourblind. This one I've just circled here is buses, and then the blue one is railways. So this is railway ridership, and this drop here is when there was a strike. The first strike made a big hit, but then the recovery was pretty much instant, which was nice. And what can we see most recently? Well, because of certain shenanigans, this is a Queen discussion-free zone, although not quite as much as last week. I did a news episode last week and explicitly made a point of not mentioning anything about the royal family, which was quite nice. But we can't avoid mentioning the reason for this drop here, which is obviously because there was a bank holiday and everything was closed, so no one was driving or taking the bus. But rail usage looks to have sort of stayed up here. Anyway, fine. I don't know, there's not much really to say about that. We can see a bit of a drop from the other strikes that we've had. This is an interesting context for this, Roz. I don't know if you've been keeping up to date with what's going on in the UK railways-wise, but everything's going to absolute hell in a handcart. We've got a shortage,
right.
A chronic shortage of drivers.
Right.
We're running in some cases we're running like 20% of trains that used to operate
Right.
before COVID. And it's just the service is collapsing. Like for me, I went over to Liverpool over the weekend to sort of meet my parents and have a nice time because Liverpool's a fun city. It's kind of like New York was in the 1920s before they did the really tall skyscrapers. It's kind of fun. But normally I take the train because it takes like 2 hours on the train from York. Goes across the Pennines, lovely job. The service has been so decimated that it was going to take over 4 hours to get over to Liverpool. So we drove and then got a park and ride train once we reached the kind of suburban area. That's rubbish. I don't like driving. I want to take the train, but I'm not taking twice the time. Anyway, that's an example of how rubbish it is. And despite all of this, we're still at between, it pitches up and down, but we're generally on average around about 90% of rail ridership at the moment, despite the fact that the timetable is completely fucked. So I consider that an indication of latent demand. Just imagine what would be happening if the service was actually running as it's supposed to. Quite something. Anyway.
It feels like every single industry out there that physically does something, which isn't, something that makes a fart app is in crisis now.
Yes.
Just because you can make so much more money making a fart app and doing nothing.
Yeah, but money is real, and so the fart app, which is invariably being invested in by SoftBank, they're not even making money anymore because the fact that they've had 30 billion of investment and $0 of profit means something now. So even those guys are up against the wall.
Thank God for that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And this is the trace since the start of that. So these traces, Roz, are just like so. This is 100% of pre-COVID ridership. So this is kind of like these are like relative. These traces are all relative to like the pre-COVID times. So it's not an absolute figure; it's a relative figure. So you can see that cycling, funnily enough, when people didn't drive around, loads of people cycled instead. That was like a happy utopia in the first lockdown. And then that's just dropped away completely as people have started driving again more. Sad times. Anyway, there you go. COVID. Oh, so, lots of people in the chat already saying things. Calling Liverpool 1920s New York is like calling Birmingham the Venice of the North. Xander, that's very naughty. Anyway, right, let us... Yeah, so last time you were on, Roz, we were talking about the fact that US railroads can be good.
Yes.
And it was a good episode. We covered some interesting things. The bridge here is one that I'm hoping to travel on when I. Hello everyone! Spoiler alert! I'm going to the US in a few weeks, and I'm hoping to just like do a pointless Acela trip, and hopefully we'll include this bridge. But anyway, I digress. That was an interesting episode. It was fun, and we covered lots of good things. Yeah. That's not what we're going to be doing this time, is it, Roz?
No. Today we're going to cover the bad stuff, and there's a lot of it.
Yeah, we're going to keep ourselves busy. On this one, there's a lot to cover, and it's going to tie into why it's going to tie into the fact that as we'll kind of tease in the news after the intro, it's the fact that it's reached breaking point for the workers, right? It's reached a point where it's absolutely intolerable for railroad staff to actually like live, to work, to function.
You have no time off, and when I mean no time off, I mean no weekends, no holidays, no nothing, and this is entirely the railroad's own doing. It's their fault, and we're going to take a sort of long historical view of how we got here. This is fun because I just get to really complain about the railroads constantly. This is all complaining, which is something I enjoy doing.
It's going to be a joyous complaint. Well, both of us enjoy complaining about things. I think we wouldn't enjoy complaining about things if there was no reasonable way to fix them. I think the enjoyment comes from the fact, or I suppose the frustration comes from the fact that there's so many of these things could be resolved. Some of them are long-standing, but a lot of things could be fixed with a reasonable strategy. It's not something that could be fixed overnight, but a lot of this stuff, I'm guessing, is stuff that with a reasonable strategy in place, you could start to pick it apart.
I feel like on a long enough timeline, every single problem that exists was something that the railroads caused themselves, some kind of self-inflicted wound.
Yeah, crikey! It's and we are going to pick the scab off that wound. Oh God, why did I use that analogy? In the rest of this this episode, everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. And as the In-City 225 fades away, Roz, we're back. So
okay, we're back in. Good,
because I couldn't
hear the theme music.
Yeah, that's it. All you can do is see the stuff, and 10 seconds after it's actually going out. What am I going to waffle? Firstly, this was me taking a selfie with the RMT picket from a month ago. Look, it's my stupid face in the corner, but ignore that. Just ignore that guy. More strikes are happening. Quite a lot more strikes, and with more strikes kind of as yet unannounced as well. So we have got ASLEF and the RMT are striking on the 1st of October, Saturday the 1st of October. Which will hopefully cause a good amount of disruption on the Sunday as well, actually, because it's difficult to get Saturday trains in the right place for Sunday as well. So Saturday, Sunday, that weekend will be a write-off. And following that, on the Wednesday, the 5th of October, ASLEF are striking again. So these are strikes that will cover quite a broad range of train operators. I think 12 or 14 of the train operators in the UK are going to be covered. And as yet unannounced are also the TSSA strikes. So these are the three different kind of main unions that cover pretty much all the kind of unionised staff. Everyone, join a union if you aren't in one already. Pretty much all the unionised staff are going to be getting covered. TSSA hopefully will be able to. They have to announce with a 2 weeks notice, so it's probably going to be a bit later than the others now. But so we have a big pile of strikes inbound, and sure enough, it's the same story over in the US, or it nearly was, right? So this we'll
it
get
may
to this,
still happen.
Yeah, it may still. We'll get to this stupid tweet by this person momentarily. But basically, there was a strike. It was called off because new T's and C's were put on the table, or a new arrangement was put on the table, but it wasn't called off permanently. It was just like, we'll delay it to review this, right? Have I got that right?
Yes, essentially, the two main unions involved, who were portrayed in the media as like, oh, these two holdout bastard unions. No,
Yeah.
the two main unions, which are the people who actually drive the trains, finally acquiesced to put the Presidential Emergency Board's recommendations up to a vote only after they included some extra some days off in the contract, which was what this whole strike, this whole labor action really is about. It's like, can I please have a day off to go to the doctor? Can I please have a day off to go to a funeral? Can I just one, please?
It's like borderline. It's absolutely staggering. It's like borderline. We always have to be careful about what the kind of wording we use, but it's like borderline indentured servitude at this point. Like people are locked in.
I mean, it's wage slavery with higher wages.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, wages mean nothing if you're essentially locked out of ever spending any time with friends or family to actually enjoy, or just on your own, having a nice time on your own. Yeah. If you haven't got a chance to do any of those things, then salary is pointless.
Yeah, I was about to say, and this is a long-term career. It's not like you're shipping up to the oil fields in Alberta for like 2 years. You're making $100,000 and then coming back. More than $100,000. That'd probably be $200,000 now. This is like, people work. The railroad used to be a good middle class career, and it just, and you had certain problems where you're away from your family for a long time, or you have weird schedules. But it was doable, and it isn't anymore.
Yeah. And this kind of leads us in. I mean, you get weird tweets like this that came up. So this Cougar Spider tweet. I mean, I'm not one, and this is why this is why I think our first episode was quite good, because a lot of people, particularly in the UK, like to just fall lazily into tropes about bashing the US railroad without fully understanding it. Which is why I thought, what'll be interesting as a bit of a counter to that is to actually explore what's good about the US railroads. But that does not mean that the US has the best rail system in the world. I just cannot fathom it. Given how much, when I spend a bit of time in Central Europe, or like in Austria, for example, where, I can see that they have modern intermodal, they've got such nice services, well-scheduled services, they've basically got tact plan type timetabling. Combined with that, they also have, they've got like break bulk, like individual wagons parked up in factories along rural lines. So they kind of like almost have a railway that manages to do that side of things, like individualized loads. And it works fantastically. I cannot see that and then think that the US is doing it right, and that's kind of what you're going to pick through, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, we're going to take a long historical view on this as well. So get ready for some real nerding out on this one.
It's going to be beautiful. So for the benefit of I'm going to read this tweet out for the benefit of the audio-only people, by the way. Hello, audio-only people. The averted freight rail... Wait a minute, this is potentially an American guy, isn't it? Where are they from? What excruciating American accent am I going to do? I've been watching a lot of... oh, man. I could do the Kentucky Fried Chicken voice, maybe. I say, the averted freight rail strike nicely demonstrates something many Americans and even more foreigners don't get. The U.S. has the best rail system. I say the best rail system in the world. It just happens to be a freight rail system. That was the tweet.
Thank you, Mr. Leghorn.
Yeah, indeed. So there we go. That's Cougar Spider's tweet, and there are issues with this, which we're going to unpick. So yeah, the last episode, I kind of right. I'm going to get him miniaturized. I'm going to get. In fact, here we go. That's just me. Let's get Roz back. There's Roz.
Hello.
Hello. So this is the last episode, episode 43, like almost 2 years ago. It was the first episode of 2021. It was a while back. So we've kind of talked about this. Now we're going to unpick it somewhat, and we're going to go right back to the beginning. People are very upset about my accent already. GDR Riley, oh God. Yes, I presume, yes. Okay, good. Marvellous. Anyway, right. John Christoph. Quickly, yeah, okay. I just gathered that with the UK rail strikes, a certain number of trains are still required to run. I assume the same would not be true if the US freight rail strike goes forward. Oh, that's an interesting question. Before we get started, Roz, did you get that? That was like, in fact, if you're in the YouTube, you can probably see the comment, which is, is there, in the US, will nothing run? Will it just be zero railroad on the day of the strike?
Freight rail strike in the US would be a complete and total shutdown of the freight rail system, of all Amtrak long-distance services. I believe a few of the railroads had plans to run very limited service using management who are qualified on locomotives, but it would have, it's not like something where it would be a complete and total shutdown. It would be, everything would grind to a halt.
Which is quite, I'm feeling, I'm not even schadenfreude, just joy at hearing that, because that's an effective strike. Whereas in the UK, we just can't quite, legally, we just can't quite reach that point. There are lots of people who scab. Frustratingly, a lot of people, so for anyone who's wondering, I'm still wearing my work clothes, which is a bit embarrassing, but when I'm in the office, people are under no illusions. In fact, I'll momentarily go big face. People are under no illusions what my thoughts are. So I'm wearing that's my union, the TSSA, and then the RMT little thing there. People are under no illusions of it. But there are a lot of people in consultancy, for example, particularly private sector, who aren't in a union. They don't necessarily see the value of it. Join union, folks. I know there are people watching this who are consultants. Join union, folks. Yeah, but there are some people who just aren't in a union who will, within Network Rail, for example, will scab, frankly, and go and help out in a signal box or something, which they shouldn't be doing because it's scabbing, folks. Don't do it. Don't let Network Rail euphemize you and pretend that it's not scabbing. It's scabbing. Don't do volunteer work on strike days. Do the absolute bare minimum that your contract allows. Otherwise, you're scabbing, folks. Anyway, there we are. Just putting that out there. Sorry, the start, the beginning, way back.
Yeah, I figured we'd start with some ancient history here. Okay, so in the United States, we've always had private railroads. That's one of the things that people hold up is like, this is why America's railroads are so great. You know, they're privatized. And then you have you have competition and stuff like that, right? And that makes the railroad is great because it has to compete with other railroads.
Yeah, that's definitely a real thing. That's definitely a real thing and not just completely made up and a complete fiction, for sure.
Railroad competition is generally fake. It's always been a fake thing. When it has happened, it's been a disaster. Because what do you wind up with when two railroads are directly competing with each other is you get a rate war, right?
Yeah.
One railroad reduces its freight rates, then one next to it reduces theirs, then you go back and forth until neither railroad can really run anymore. And then finally at that point the executives have to get together and say, all right, we're all going to agree to raise rates back up to
and then it becomes
where
a cartel
Exactly. It's a cartel, but the cartel also falls apart pretty quickly. Where this happened, it caused these cyclical disruptions to the economy, right? And so that's this. Railroad competition has always been fake, and railroads don't compete well with each other because, they're a natural monopoly, right?
Yeah.
And if you are located on a railroad, you can only use that railroad. Maybe a town has two or three, but they go different places.
It's an interesting thing because every now and then people bring up Italy as an example of where competition has worked, and they say, well, you've got the open access operators, right? And they've made the national operator run a better service because their service is so good. That's probably the closest to a compelling argument about competition I've ever heard. But the thing is, as soon as that service reaches a reason, firstly, I don't buy it, because if there's an open access operator that's doing well, they're extracting revenue from the incumbent operator who should just be running those services so that they can. Because otherwise, if you've got one operator nicking all the profit and the other one just running the less profitable services, that's the whole point of a railroad works by balancing like more and less profitable routes, right? You get the ones that bring in loads of money and they cross subsidize the ones that don't. So even that argument, for me, never holds up, because it's just, we have open access operators in the UK. There's a weird one called Lumo that started fairly recently. And it's like, if they're making good money on that service, why is it not just an LNER service? And then that money goes to LNER and then they make their service better, right? It doesn't make any sense. So again, it just doesn't really hold up. I don't see any argument for beneficial competition. And as you say, like in the US, I'm sure it's definitely in the case of the UK, where you did have physical competition between infrastructure. The rail map was a horrible, pointless mess, and you just ended up with like utterly pointlessly duplicated infrastructure. And it was awful and pointless and wasteful, and invariably then got like abandoned again. So it's just, zero and the routes used to like fight each other and end up with stupid positions of stations. So you end up with a total zero strategy for what the railway looks like. Hence why the UK railway map's such a mess.
Yeah. The one thing you do get out of this is railroads are, of course, the first big corporations, so they start trying to figure out ways to figure out what's going on in the railroad. You sort of develop statistics about them. One that appears fairly early, and we're going to talk about a lot today, is the operating ratio, right? And the operating ratio is basically, of every dollar of revenue the railroad brings in, how much of that is spent on actually running the railroad. That's like the big top level like railroad statistic to this day. So anyway, let's go to the next slide.
Let's do it. Yeah. Roz is leaning across the Atlantic and tapping me on the shoulder to go to the next slide. Right, here we go. We have a map.
We have a map. All right, so our first few railroads go from, the East Coast, the Great Lakes, to the Ohio River in the late 1850s, just before the Civil War. Of course, Abraham Lincoln wants to do a transcontinental railroad. And this is done through land grants. That's how you fund it, right? You have sort of this checkerboard land grant system where railroads are granted land along their right-of-way in a checkerboard pattern to a certain extent. And this is obviously done without regard for, people who are already living there, stuff like that.
Shout out to all of the people who actually lived on this land before the invaders came in and just decided they owned it without any sort of, any sort of reasonable recompense, let alone a basic admittance that the people who lived there were human. Not great.
Yes, and so this is a great big rolling genocide machine.
Yeah.
And all right, what else happened sort of in this era? The Southern Pacific Railroad invents the concept of corporate personhood through a very strained interpretation of the 14th Amendment, which has done nothing but good for us since. Tom Scott, who was president of the Pennsylvania Railroad during this era, he tries to broker a deal to get Rutherford Hayes elected president in the corrupt bargain of 1877, where he would essentially, for fiddling with certain sets of Southern electors, he would get a charter for his Texas and Pacific Railroad, and in exchange, Rutherford Hayes would end Reconstruction. So he's some pretty serious racism and genocide coming out of even the Eastern railroads.
Yeah.
Now, funnily enough, Tom Scott did not get his Texas and Pacific Railroad, but they did end Reconstruction. So I lose.
Yeah, it's a lose-lose situation, I think. There, yeah.
Yeah. Someone commented, I didn't know Tom Scott was that old.
He is.
I'm
He is.
I'm here at the Texas and Pacific Depot
Yeah.
in Fort Worth.
Oh dear. By the way, people in the chat, for those who are new to the chat, because there's like 150 of you here, if you want to leave a question, then at my name and it goes red, and then I notice, and then once we've reached the end of a slide and there's a natural spot where I'm not going to like annoyingly cut Rod's up, we'll bounce through questions. Let's go.
All right, let's go to the next one.
Sure. Oh, golly, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So these cyclical railroad booms and busts result in a lot of economic instability. One big aspect of this was the Panic of 1873, not directly caused by railroads, but they certainly contributed, and the subsequent Long Depression, right? And this culminates in the Great Railroad Strike of 1877. It starts in Martinsburg, West Virginia, I want to say. Yeah, on the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad after the railroad cut workers' pay 3 times in 3 months, I want to say. And this strike action spreads really quickly. The worst the violence and riots were in Pittsburgh, where Pittsburghers hated the Pennsylvania Railroad. So when the workers went on strike, the whole city went on strike, and then it just devolved into a giant riot. And they burned down all the railroad infrastructure in the city.
There we go.
And they have to bring in the Philadelphia division of the Pennsylvania National Guard to declare war on Pittsburgh.
Is this another one of those scenes where a load of small flags wibble across the screen and poke at some guys and then wibble back across the screen the other direction?
Yes.
Yes. yeah. Okay. Yeah.
This is
watch
the
Franklin,
origin,
everyone.
This is the origin of the Sheets Wawa divide. With instability in the industry like this, screwing up the whole economy, eventually the government steps in, creates something called the Interstate Commerce Commission, which has the power to regulate freight railroad rates as well as a wide variety of other things. They give themselves some extra powers later. And so the railroad industry is stabilized through like the late 1800s into the early 1900s. But
it's interesting that the parallel between like the kind of the demise of laissez-faire in the railroads, like it happened for different reasons, but at kind of similar times in the US and Europe, or certainly the US and the UK. It's quite interesting to sort of look at across the Atlantic and see that kind of this laissez-faire approach to railroads kind of like met its demise about the same time. It's interesting.
Yes, I mean just a complete implosion. Yeah. So we're gonna skip a little bit here and go forward to World War One. Next slide, please.
Here we go. Here are locomotives.
Here are locomotives. Yes.
A 280 and a 210. A 282 and a 210-2.
Yes. So in World War One, railroads are playing a vital role in shipping crap over to Europe so that we can go fight Germany and other people.
Yeah, for sure.
And this is where
I was going to say I was in Liverpool and I went to the Maritime Museum in Liverpool, which frankly is looking a little bit dated. But actually, the bit on the Battle of the Atlantic was really interesting, and it just brings home the scale of how much was being moved across. Like, it's just an insane amount of crap was being moved across the Atlantic, and then a reasonably insane amount of that crap ended up at the bottom of the ocean as well.
Yes.
But it's pretty impressive, and that didn't just end at the coast, end at the U.S. coast. Like, the railroads absolutely facilitate that, right?
Yes. But World War One really showed the shortcomings of the railroad system as it was at the time, right? Because port facilities, especially in New York, were entirely backed up. Cars were stacked up on main lines for miles, and this is debatably, you can make the argument here that this wasn't a railroad problem so much as a Port of New York problem, but. They nationalized the entire system. They created the United States Railroad Administration. They took over all the railroads. They streamlined and rationalized operations. This is the only time that railroads were operated in the United States for like the public good instead of private profit.
It sounds effective. Why didn't it stick? It sounds like it worked.
God. Yeah, it worked really good is the thing. They developed a bunch of standardized steam locomotive designs. That's what I've put up here. We have
nice. Okay.
USRA Light Mikado, and then down here is the USRA. I want to say this is a 210-2. Is it Texas? I don't remember. So, this is... it's very much a progressive era institution, and they streamline a lot of operations. They integrate railroads together in ways they weren't before. They also invented a bunch of metrics to measure performance. One of which is this sort of general measure of railroad efficiency called ton miles per train hour, right? And so the idea is this is how many tons of train are being moved, how many miles in how many hours. So a longer, heavier, faster train is more efficient, right? Bigger number is more.
I like that ratio. That manages to capture quite a lot in one number.
Yes.
It's pretty good.
John Christoph has said a 210-2 is a Santa Fe. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. Thanks, John Christoph. Santa Fe. There we go. There, okay. I corrected it. There we are. Everything is well again. we're nothing if not a factually inaccurate podcast here.
Yeah. So so this sort of this system is reprivatized after the war. Unfortunately, there was, I believe, a movement to keep it nationalized, and it didn't go anywhere. Anyway, but at this point, the railroads are still flush with capital at this point. So let's talk about some of the improvements they made during, I guess, the golden era. Let's start with, let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, let's do this. Oh, here we go. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, I see nice things. Okay, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I'm also noticing a pattern here of things because that's, and okay, some of this might be familiar to people who watched the last, it's a problem podcast, but we're taking it at slightly different angles. So absorb the content, my friends. I see overhead electrification, like a weird version of rigid overhead electrification here.
Yeah,
I see more overhead electrification. I see more overhead electrification with the GG1. Oh my god! And I see third rail electrification. Yes. There's a theme here.
Yeah, I stole this slide off of our battery locomotives episode, but in order to talk about how it got bad, we had to talk about the trajectory we're on before it started getting bad.
Yeah.
One of the big factors is electrification.
Yeah.
Railroads were definitely on a trend to electrify after World War I because it was so much more efficient than steam locomotives. It was so much more, it was cleaner, and they had the money to do so. Pennsylvania Railroad electrifies a bunch. Milwaukee Road electrifies a bunch, but in two discontinuous segments. Bad idea there. So this is sort of, it shows that, all right, they were still willing to make capital investments back then. Now, notably, Pennsylvania did do some funky accounting that let them say that all their construction was operating expenses, so they didn't have to pay taxes as a result. But you know what? If you get better infrastructure, whatever. But the strategy here for infrastructure on the railroad is basically more is more. Let's go to the next one.
Oh, yes. I mean, this is good. Oh!
Yeah.
This reminds me of one of the horseshoes I did in Railroads Online, RIP.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything I'm seeing here is pleasing to thine eye.
Exactly. This is the horseshoe curve, just outside of Altoona, Pennsylvania. So your strategy, again, is more, right? So you build more tracks, you run more trains, you get more freight traffic, you get more profit, right? Lots of railroads had, 4-track main lines, especially out east. This is a philosophy that's going to change, though. You also have the Railway Labor Act passed in 1926, which is the one that regulates how we deal with railway labor now, and that's when the really long and difficult process to strike is created.
It kind of initiates at that point. Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Was that 26? Did you say 1926?
1926, yeah. 26, and this is and this is when the railroads are hauling all kinds of different traffic. And you're doing this it's facilitated by having lots and lots of infrastructure.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of ways around it, and we'll get to that in the next couple of slides.
Yeah.
So anyway, World War II happens, and after that, the conventional narrative is, give me the next slide.
Do this. Oh God. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a conventional narrative I want to push back on here, which is, the interstate highway system is funded in 1956 and instantly built out, or possibly it was retroactively built out in the late 40s, causing the railroads to go into decline as trucking takes over freight, right?
Yeah. See, it's interesting because that's also a narrative that comes out in the UK, which is wrong. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wrong.
It's wrong.
It's wrong. There's lots of decline. Certainly in the UK, lots of decline had already been, like, a lot of the pieces had already been set for the decline, and actually it had already been happening for quite a number of decades.
The railroads were engineering their own demise at this point. Yeah. They were actively making stupid decisions to cause themselves problems in the future, right? And a lot of traffic was deliberately ceded to trucks or cars. Now, there is an extent to which roads got a lot better starting in like the 19-teens. And this affected a lot of like streetcar and interurban companies, but there's a lot of stuff where disinvestment started early on. So I guess next slide.
Yeah. Okay. So here I'm not doing a very good job of audio describing. Everyone, the previous slide, had a big cloverleaf intersection between two highways. And the 1890, the January 1892 edition of Good Roads magazine.
Yes.
So there we go. And the next slide, the slide that we're now on, is showing Pittsburgh,
yes.
And it's showing a variety of coloured lines reaching their way into the centre of Pittsburgh city. From kind of so there's some lines going out to what is that new not Newcastle but New Space Castle. And kind of out to is that Blairville in
yes.
the east?
Looks like it.
God, is that where Tony Blair lives? That's his place. Oh God, the dots are on top of the text here. Is that Connellsville? Connells? I can't. The one at the bottom there, kind of
Probably,
north of Ohiopyle. North of Ohiopyle.
Good question. That's somewhere near the town of 84, Pennsylvania.
Well, there we go. And then there's
home of 84 lumber.
Ooh.
It's Cannonsburg.
It is there's Cannonsburg as well. And yeah, anyway, basically a load of snaking lines reaching into Pittsburgh. I have no idea what these lines are yet. But
so this is the 1941 Pittsburgh commuter rail network. Different colors means they're owned by different companies. I forget which is which, but I would say the blue is probably the Pennsylvania Railroad.
Okay.
But this is I'd say the commuter trains were sort of the canary in the coal mine that stuff was going to go wrong.
It's reminding me a bit of you're reminding me a bit of the like the Pennsylvania, like the Conrail episode, like basically you're reminding me of the episode where that it felt like immediately the railroads hated commuter traffic for some reason, even though actually in the UK it was quite different. Commuter traffic was always seen as like the golden boy, but actually in the US it was quite different. Just all the railroads just hated commuter traffic.
Yeah, commuter trains were probably losing money, I'd say, starting from like the 1920s. So, commuter rail, these are fast, frequent trains. They do short runs. The fares are cheap. All of this is pretty bad for the number, ton miles per train hour.
Yeah.
But they're also, a lot of these commuter trains really started to lose money fairly early because there's competition from cars, competition from electric interurban trains. A lot of the service was not very good to start out with. I know this is shown as commuter rail, but this is also sort of, some of these lines are seeing like 2 trains each way each day.
Yeah, that's useless.
Yeah.
Frequencies, freedom, etc.
Exactly. And a lot of railroads really resist investing in commuter rail because you could do really good commuter rail if you had really good equipment and you ran it frequently. But for example, the Pennsylvania Railroad got its last commuter trains in 1937. And they were built to a design from 1909.
Oh no.
Most railroads refuse to invest in new commuter trains or service without some kind of local or state funding, really by the early post-war era, and they only operate those that they're legally required to.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting because this is quite at this point. There's very much people can try and unduly draw parallels, but at this point there's very much a divergence in the way the history develops at this point. Because of course in the UK we've got a nationalised rail system at this point. And actually, okay, the nationalisation in the initial years, it was all a bit of a shambles, to be honest. But quite quickly, the things started looking up, and commuter rail was a success story. So it's radically different trajectory to what was going on in the US at the time. It's quite interesting to kind of, sometimes people try to draw too many parallels from the Second World War onwards, but actually the paths are quite different. There are some similarities, like competition being fake is still a similarity, but like it's interesting to sort of they're two different paths for sure. Right. So shall I flick us on to the next slide? Oh, it's a milk tank car.
It's a milk tank car. This is another sort of business that the railroads really started to try and shed pretty early on. And milk was an important railroad commodity, especially in the East Coast. You transported them in these big refrigerated tank cars or in big steel kegs and refrigerated box cars, right? And it's fresh milk. It goes bad pretty quickly. So you got to run these short, frequent trains that go fast, right? Again, that makes the numbers sad. A lot of times that's hauled at the head end of local passenger trains or even commuter trains. So it's this is a form of business it makes money, but the margins are low, which makes it has to go fast. So you're making both the numbers sad, the operating ratio and ton miles per train hour, right?
Yeah. And that makes the conditional formatting from the 1940s go bad.
Mm-hmm.
So when you've got your Excel spreadsheet with all the conditional formatting, it makes all the boxes go red, which makes the accountants unhappy.
Yes. And the other one, let's go to the next slide. Another one is, of course,
there we go.
This wonderful thing called less than carload freight, right? And so less than carload is when you have many different shipments for different destinations in the same boxcar, right?
Yeah.
And this requires these big, labor-intensive, less than carload depots in major cities and at major terminals, which notably are significantly more space efficient than modern distribution centers.
Yes, that is a very key point. Yeah. Oh my God.
They are more expensive to operate though, right? Because you need lots of big burly guys moving crates around.
And it involves like a load of planks between the cars, and it's a bit of a nightmare for kind of safe working practices, and it's not hugely efficient, but also in terms of space used, actually quite impressive because it kind of combines the movement and the warehousing kind of all in one. So weirdly, I was for various reasons diverted off the M1 driving about a month and a half ago in the middle of the night, and got diverted through what I can only describe as like massive road distribution center hell, with just these enormous warehouses.
New Jersey,
In this case, it was in Bedfordshire, but like near Luton actually. So like some of the worst places in Britain already. But anyway, in terms of just being utterly boring. But so it's like these sorts of enormous, and it's just so much land. Just like you look at it in an aerial view, and it's just so much land, and it's all empty most of the time, which for railroads is good, but for given that it's all tarmac and it's a huge amount of space, that's bad. Anyway, sorry, I digress, but it just put me in mind of how inefficient roads. Like this might not look pretty to people, but actually it's not. It's a lot better than the road alternative in an urban area, frankly.
I was about to say railroads, pervious surface actually. So. This is all break bulk traffic, so there is going to be some amount of freight that walks away. We haven't invented modern surveillance.
Some of it may. There's attrition. It's just attrition. Regular.
It fell off a truck.
Yeah.
The other thing is this means the railroad can ship a whole lot of random crap to a whole lot of random destinations, and this may go to other cities. It may go to really small towns, which is the next slide.
Here we go. Green Cove.
Mm-hmm. Yes. This is O. Winston Link photograph from 1956. This is Old Maud bows the Virginia Creeper, right? This is a daily local mixed train that came from Abington, Virginia, which is way in like the southern part, right? And so another form of service that was run were these small local trains, right?
Yeah.
They go pretty slow. They have a couple passenger cars. They have a couple freight cars, right? And this is like you're moving, freight that goes to like local businesses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you're doing parcels and mail and stuff like that. It's really essential service, right?
Yeah. And actually, this is something that was still in the UK at the time. Like these services very much still existed in the UK at about this point, like through the 50s and pretty much had disappeared by the end of the 60s. But they were still a thing very much in the 50s, and in fact, we're still a lifeline in the UK at this point. And I'd imagine it's the same for the US, right? Lots of local communities. These were a lifeline, right?
Yes. I mean, there weren't very good roads to Green Cove, and there still isn't a really good road to Green Cove. But the railroad is gone now. It's like 20 miles of switchback mountain roads from the interstate at this point. So this is another type of service which, it's essential. It may even run at a profit, but it's bad for number.
Yeah.
It makes the numbers sad.
Yeah. Oh dear. So we depart Green Cove. But so for everyone, there is a nag, if you like, with its head dipped. It is indeed bowing the local service, kind of puffing its way up the hill. And there's just some local yokels sort of by the station, kind of waiting for the train to arrive, and actually looking quite pleased with themselves. There's a dog that's looking quite pleased in the doorway. It's a picture of I wouldn't say rural idyll, but rural contentness. People are contented in this image. There we are.
Yeah, and this service is like, okay, there's a bunch of stuff here that the railroad doesn't want to have. They got to maintain a building.
Yeah.
They got to have a freight agent here so that Farmer Brown can drop off his harvest and pick up his new John Deere tractor. You have even these little things. They have to hire more people than they want to do it. So
you have to provide people gainful employment and support them to learn to grow and have skills. Boo! We don't want this.
Don't want that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, dreadful. So next slide.
Another kind of service that was bad for number. Railway Express Agency services, right? This is for parcels and express freight. It goes at the head end of passenger trains, and then you stop at the station, you take the parcels off, you put other parcels on, so on and so forth. This is like a labor-intensive thing, right? And then they deliver the stuff directly to your door. This is like UPS before UPS. Although I think UPS has been around for a while. So.
Well, because this is a good idea, folks. And what's ironic is that in the UK right now, and GB anyway, we're currently in the process of attempting to reinvent this because it's actually a really good way to do. They're like when you've got like 100 sole traders all doing Amazon deliveries at the lowest possible rate in a city. It does not mean that you have a good traffic situation, and it is not an efficient way to move stuff around. So, funnily enough, we're going back to this. Certainly in the UK, we're going back to this or attempting to, because it's actually a really good idea, really good use of space. So it was called, the BR version of this in the late days, it was called Red Star Parcels, which is obviously just awesome. Red Star Parcels.
I like that.
Oh, yeah.
So we described a couple categories of service there, which, these are, again, it's not that they don't make money. It's that they require a lot of money invested in them to make money.
Yes.
Right? So this is where, the trucking industry comes in, right? And cars, which is the next slide.
Yeah. Oh, God, I love that you've put the truck from Joule in here. That pleases me quite a lot. That's very good.
So Your real conventional narrative here is, the railroads were like, boo-hoo, us poor railroads just can't compete with this new interstate highway system, which mostly had not been built out at this point, in like the 50s and 60s, right? And this is like the public-facing opinion, but the truth is the railroads are sort of like, Yeah, thank God we can finally get rid of all this shit, huh?
Yeah. They're like, oh, that stuff that make the numbers go sad. Let's just make it
that
gone.
makes all the numbers sad.
Yeah.
You know, even if you are making money off of it, you're the return on investment, the operating ratio is unhappy, right? So they get out of these businesses like less than carload, like milk local trains, commuter trains, focus on this very narrow core business, which is long, heavy trains that go fast between terminals, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's an easy cop out, frankly, at this point, right?
Yeah, it's you get rid of anything that requires any kind of complexity of operation.
Yeah.
You know, and this is what enables a lot of the disinvestment that follows.
Yeah, and in a way, this is almost like I mean, in lots of ways, this is foreshadowing. But it's just put me in mind of one particular thing, which is like it's foreshadowing of a general attitude to the fact that everything is, all the services, all the kind of this kit is, and invariably the people, the staff that actually make it work, are secondary to this magical ideal of the perfect type of train we want to run. So and it's almost like. It's that attitude, almost like decades before the current crisis, like of starting to really culturally embed of everything is secondary to running the big bulk train many miles.
The ideal railroad owns zero track and runs zero trains. I've said this before, right?
Yeah. Oh god. Yeah. So we jump forward to the next slide.
Jump forward a little bit to. I mean, I'm using this as sort of to generically talk about the immediate post-war era, right? Big productivity gains in American railroading, right? Because you have diesel locomotives, you have multiple unit power or control, right? You have some railroads electrified, and most people in the industry at this point thought electrification was inevitable because that ekes out some productivity gains over dieselization, but no one wants to do it first is the thing. No one wants to put their capital forward. I would describe it as like, the whole industry was like a bunch of penguins at the edge of a cliff, and then they push until one falls off and to see if it's safe to go fish or if it gets immediately eaten by an orca. But no one actually falls off.
No one falls off until the present day. I suppose if anyone wants to get the full history of this sort of era, kind of then go back to the Well Is Your Problem podcast episodes, the epic saga of the Penn Central, right?
Yes, and I did a full episode on like the failure of American railroads to electrify with Bill Humphrey on Arsenal for Democracy a long time ago.
Yeah, oh no, that's not the one that you've cross-hosted, but there's you can find it easily. If you Google it, you'll find it, folks.
I feel like the failure to electrify is one of the things that enabled a lot of the boneheaded decisions that followed.
It would have because it would have made the railway work so much better. It's almost like it would have kicked them out of a vicious cycle of cultural malaise. There would have been an example of, we invested, it made a good thing happen. And that might have like kicked them out of this vicious downward spiral, right?
Yes.
Maybe.
If you had put that investment in, you would have a very different railroad today.
Yeah. And all of a sudden things like commuting would have been cheaper because commuter trains, particularly when they're electric, are just unbelievably light and cheap. Like they're light and they're cheap and they just don't cause any track damage and you can run them to death. Like those things are. You look at the southeast in the UK and look at how long the Mark I slam door electric stock was running, right? Decades and decades and decades. And okay, crashworthiness was horrible, but actually, so long as you didn't crash them into each other because you fatigued a signal engineer, those trains could just run. They could have run for another 30 years. They're bomb-proof.
The Pennsylvania Railroad bought their first MP54s in I want to say like 1900 something. They're multiple unit cars, and they ran up until like 1989 on SEPTA. They donated one to the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania, and when they got it onto the property, it fell apart like the Blues Brothers car, and they had to scrap it, unfortunately.
Oh no. Well, that'll do it. That'll do
Yeah,
it.
that'll do
Yeah.
it.
Oh, crikey. Anyway, sorry, we've
right.
massively segued, but yeah.
Yes.
So things are afoot at this point, as you say.
Yeah, exactly. There are events failing to occur that should have occurred.
Yeah.
But you have these big diesel trains. You have fewer crews moving heavier trains farther in the same amount of time than they ever have before, right? And the railroads, a lot of them took a big hit to maintenance in the war, but most of them recover quickly, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You still have long distance passenger trains. They're popular with the traveling public. Many of them hit like 100 miles an hour pretty regularly. Then we have this 1946 Naperville, Illinois wreck, and this is another like turning point, right?
Oh dear. Yeah.
So the FRA. So what happened was there was an advanced section of a streamliner, and then the regular streamliner, and the advanced section stopped because they had a problem with something on a wheels, right?
Okay.
And while the engineer was coming out and checking it out, the regular streamliner just whacked into the back.
Oh no, that will...
killed like 45 people. And it was at like 80 miles an hour.
You've not covered that, have you? You haven't done a W2IP.
We have not done the Naperville crash because it is a pivot point. I would say this is as Matt Christman would say, a hinge point.
Yeah.
So the FRA after this regulates train speeds. Trains cannot exceed 79 miles an hour without a cab signal system and automatic train stop, right? Which neither of these trains were equipped with.
Yeah.
And so rather than invest money in those systems, the railroads just lower the speed of everything.
Oh, no. Don't. What?
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
And this is, by this point, okay, we talked about how the roads weren't good at this point, but they are improving.
And they're
Right,
good enough that all of a sudden that tips the balance quite radically into journey times being substantially better to drive, even if it involves insane, like multi-day trips.
Yes. Yeah, it becomes, all the schedules just get worse, right?
Yeah.
Apart from really isolated instances of improving stuff. So then we enter sort of the crisis of the 60s and 70s, which is mostly in the Northeast, right? So railroads in the Northeast of the United States, you got lots of dense population up there. Systems optimized for short hauls, short trains, mixed traffic, all this stuff. Lots of switching cars, not a lot of high speed running over long distances, right? Which are things that make the numbers sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
and so these railroads are making money. This is a crucial point. They are making money, but do you want to do essential maintenance and infrastructure improvements so you can compete in the future, or do you want to pay the dividend?
You're gonna pay that damn dividend.
Gonna pay that dividend. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a no-brainer.
How else do you undertake the minor low-level crime and the employment of sex workers without paying the dividend?
This is true. This is true. So and I'll try and be brief about Penn Central here, but the Pennsylvania Railroad and New York Central Railroad were two of like the really big railroads in the Northeast. Pennsylvania Railroad was the biggest railroad. A lot of work had been done trying to figure out what the best merger partners were, because neither of them were in great fiscal health at this point. But it was a question of, do you merge the Pennsylvania Railroad with the Norfolk and Western Railroad, which was a coal conveyor belt that printed money, and then you would also merge the New York Central with the C&O, another coal conveyor belt that printed money. Or what if we merge these two unhealthy railroads together to a super railroad, right?
Yeah, that, and as we know from W2IP's episode on the subject, that went wonderfully and there weren't any problems. That was great. Everything went well.
It's a goddamn disaster.
Yeah. It was a goddamn engineering disaster, and there are slides on it.
worst decisions made in American corporate history.
Yeah.
It did not have to be like this. Um,
Yeah, there were a kind of a cascade of fuck ups that led to that, and uh, kind of collisions of circumstance that led to all of the worst decisions being made
Yes.
in a straight line to lead to the worst possible outcome.
Totally incompatible corporate culture. Everyone hated each other.
Yeah.
The management was stratified so that at one level of management it was Pensy guys. The next level down it was New York Central guys. The next level down it was Pensy guys. So everyone fucking hated each other. You wound up with a railroad that had suddenly disparate, duplicate routes. It had lots of duplicate infrastructure, right? And meanwhile, they're still trying to get rid of these services that make the numbers sad. They managed to shed passenger trains to Amtrak. Amtrak's created by our most social democratic president, Richard Nixon. They managed to pawn off commuter trains to municipalities or discontinue them entirely. This is the era where like cities as big as Cleveland lose all their commuter trains. And it's not enough. It goes bankrupt, of course, right? And
The big biggest corporate bankruptcy ever, right?
Ever, yeah,
Just
it was
ever.
the biggest one ever. I think it was not exceeded until like Enron, and the reorganization leads to the creation of Conrail, which is a quasi-nationalized freight rail system in the Northeast of the United States. Of course, when Penn Central goes bankrupt, it takes a lot of other smaller railroads down with it. So Conrail is quasi-nationalized, but its mission is to make profit. It's not to provide essential freight services. It is to make a profit.
Yeah.
And
yeah, crikey.
yeah. So this is what happens when you run government like a business.
Yeah. Abolish the treasury, folks. Yes.
Exactly.
So
how do we take this failing system and start making money? And the answer is on the next slide.
oh, here we go.
It's something called demarketing, right?
On the screen right now is a fairly short wheelbase kind of boxcar made out of wooden slats and timber and corrugated iron, and it looks a bit shonky, to be honest.
This is a stock car. It's for livestock, right?
Ah, yeah.
Livestock was a particularly difficult form of freight to handle because, you have to feed the animals so they don't die before they're supposed to.
Yes, you have to keep them alive so they can be killed.
Exactly, right? So we talked about, seeding all this traffic to trucks. That's a big demarketing aspect, right?
Yeah.
Conrail's management really took it to a new level, and they demarketed like entire sectors of carload freight traffic, like livestock, for instance. They just stopped hauling it. Broadly, I think they still did have one train that went to one set of shipments they couldn't get rid of that went to a kosher butcher in New Jersey. That ran until like the late 80s.
And then they managed to even butcher that.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
But after the Staggers Rail Act is passed in 1980, it makes a lot of this stuff much easier, right? Because you have the railroad they deregulate the railroad. They take a lot of the decision-making power out of the hands of the Interstate Commerce Commission. I believe it was abolished shortly afterwards.
Yeah, containerization had already their battle at the Interstate Commerce Commission had already they'd been screwed by the box, right? They'd already kind of had their monopoly on goods cartelling, kind of somewhat smooshed.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to containers later. So, in addition to demarketing, it makes stuff like abandoning rail lines a lot easier, right? And this does a number of things. Suddenly you can abandon all these low margin branch lines. You can rip up the rail. If it's good rail, you can use it somewhere else on the system. You can start lifting excess tracks. You can. This also puts pressure on workers, right? Because you're running a smaller system with fewer trains. All of a sudden, it's like, oh gee, I might get laid off permanently. And so you can exercise pressure that you didn't
Yeah.
previously have against the union because you have the threat of, well, maybe we'll lay off another 1,000 workers,
Yeah,
if
maybe
you
we'll
don't
just
give us
sever
this
that
demand.
entire bit of the
Yeah.
network, and all those people will lose their jobs. You wouldn't want us to do that, would you? Oh.
Ooh.
Yeah, yeah, for
Um,
sure.
I guess let's move to the next
Oh,
slide
let's
here.
do that. Oh, this is a nice thing. This is nice. Tell what. So on screen right now is a diesel locomotive with one, two, three, four, five, six double decker. I presume commuting, but maybe just. Oh no!
Yes,
What is that? Is that NJ? Is that New Jersey?
it's New Jersey Transit. Yeah.
New Jersey Transit. See, I've never seen one of these in the wild. Maybe I will in the future. Anyway, it's very nice. 7-car double deck commuter train. It's a bit
So
weird to see local haul commuter trains, to be honest, but that's a US. The US does that in a big way.
You may notice there are 2 trackways here with no tracks on them.
Oh yes, we can see here. Here is a single track railway
Yeah.
for a commuter, and here you can see the other side, and also you can see an empty track. This is, I mean, the UK did so much of this in the 70s and 80s. Oh, sad. There's the 2 tracks have disappeared. They're gone. Might have been a good idea to have them there, to be honest, but there we go.
So this is the former Central Railroad in New Jersey main line, right, which is now the New Jersey Transit Raritan Valley line. It was used to have 4 tracks, lots and lots of freight trains headed to New York City, but also freight trains that were doing local service, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Once you streamline service patterns through demarketing, through getting rid of the traffic that requires complex operations, stuff like that, all of a sudden maybe you don't need 4 tracks here. So you lift up those excess tracks, you use the rail somewhere else or reuse the ties. That saves you a lot of maintenance costs, right? But it also reduces capacity. And there's this happens sort of first on Conrail because they're in super austerity mode, but this spreads all over the United States, right? And keep in mind, most railroads outside the Northeast were in okay financial shape. They were not doing especially badly.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some interesting discussion going on. Hybersquickelhausen, there's some nice chats going on about metropolitan populations and how these were being shaped at the time, and the fact that actually there was absolutely a justification for an increase in these sorts of services, which maybe wasn't happening. And in fact, the 4-track could have been quite valuable to run higher density commuter services, like skip stop sort of patterns and all that sort of fun stuff. Alas, not.
Unfortunately, yeah. I still think there's a good number of freight trains that come through here. I'm not sure about
Oh, really?
that, though.
Oh, God. So, yeah,
But this was
it's a classic stopping train in the way of the through train capacity plop situation.
yes.
Yeah, not great.
I want to say this extra track on the side is where the freight trains go. But this is also
I see.
when
Yeah, there's this knackered thing here. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
you also eliminate a lot of maintenance intensive features of tracks, like say super elevation, right? Which I think all y'all have a different word for.
Well, we call it, to be honest, we do call it super elevation. But yeah, everyone who's watching this who doesn't know what super elevation is, it can't.
Yes.
Here we are. Here's a nice on the corner here. Here's a nice sleeper with 2 rails. One rail is higher than the other rail. This value here, we refer to this value here as E, which is E is short for super elevation, but in the UK we call it can't, and that is can be useful to balance a bit of the lateral forces through curves. There we are.
Yes.
There's our lesson about can, everyone.
Especially on tighter curves if you want higher speeds. It's bad for American freight cars is one of the big things about it. That's why there's very little of it left anymore.
Yeah, and it's see my short run episode that I never series that I never finished called The Permanent Way, where I used City Skylines to explain this stuff, but where I explain more about Kant and why it's a good idea, but also sometimes a bad idea. But yes, it's the sort of thing that requires a maintenance regime because it's an alignment is less forgiving if you have some cant on it, because if you don't maintain it properly, you might get a twist, and that's a good way to throw a train into a tree.
Yeah. So on Conrail, they start doing all this stuff early, right? It spreads around America afterwards, right? Because Conrail returned to profitability so quickly. So all this redundant track from the new service patterns, which are mostly long trains, point to point, they get rid of it. They're just like, yep, don't need that anymore. You can downgrade maintenance of certain tracks to lower speeds as well. It doesn't it it's very much it's an austerity mindset even while the industry is making money, because you gotta make the operating ratio happy.
It's all
right?
about that operating ratio, even
Yeah.
if it means materially very little and has absolutely no reflection on the fact that by this point the railroad is a critical service for, like, not even by this point, for a very long time the railroad had been a critical service and a critical function in allowing communities to exist and to function.
Yes.
And that is, funnily enough, not factored into a operating ratio at all.
Right. Fuck you. Buy a car.
Yeah, yeah. That's also the UK attitude to this day. Sad times. So shall I hop forwards?
Let's go to the next one.
Ooh, it's another map from Trains
Yes.
magazine. Thank you, Trains magazine from 2006. The Kalmbach Publishing Company.
This is a map of where American railroads were double tracked. I want to say in 1951. Anything that's colored is double track. And this is all just main lines, right?
Wait a minute, I've just noticed an immediate thing, which is that there isn't a single railroad that is consistently double track from one ocean to the other.
No.
None of the transcontinental railroads, as in none of the coast-to-coast railroads, are double track for their entire length.
Nope.
Oh,
It's all single track with passing sidings.
that doesn't feel like a good thing.
Which is going to be important later.
Put that down in your copybooks, everyone.
Exactly. Now, let's look at the state of things more recently. That's the next slide.
Let's do it. Here we go. Oh, I might flick back and forth a bit so we can pay a bit of attention.
Yeah.
Okay. I see substantially fewer bits of double track.
There's fewer railroads in general. There is actually a little bit more continuous double track across the country, but there's fewer railroads in general. And this reflects just, how you lift track because you have fewer service patterns, because you're only doing the stuff with the highest margins. And while you're making less money overall, you have made the numbers happy. You do have a better operating ratio. You do have a better, whatchamacallit. You are moving more ton miles per train hour. You're using fewer people to move more stuff, even though you're moving less stuff overall.
The two numbers are happy. It doesn't matter that the reality is that you've massively diminished the service. No. That's not relevant. There's only two numbers, and now the numbers are happy.
And your services are very, very limited at this point, right? You're not doing like anything that's direct to consumer. You're not doing anything, like you're not bringing the Farmer Brown his brand new John Deere tractor down at the freight station. What you're doing is Farmer Brown has to bring his harvest to a farmer's co-op, which then has to truck it to a bigger farmer's co-op with a rail spur, and then that that one's big enough that it's worth it to pick up 3 cars of wheat once a week, right?
That's gone. It's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's sad. So we have these two maps. We've got to the point where we've diminished. This is such a it's another one of those situations. Two very different paths in story, but across the Atlantic, back here in Soggy Island, we were also doing this sort of stuff. We were rationalizing. We were getting rid of double track and putting in single track. Basically, shrink wrapping our infrastructure to match a service pattern that was very much of a certain period of time. Now, in the UK, from the mid-'80s onwards, we started seeing very dramatic growth of particularly the passenger railway, which didn't necessarily happen in the same way in the US. But anyway, sorry, but yeah. So I don't know. Continue on the tail, and we shall see.
We saw a big growth in traffic due to something goofy. So, but first, I will mention that during this sort of era, we're in sort of, if we're looking this along a linear timeline, consider us to be in like the late 80s, early 90s right now. This is the era of the mega mergers, right? We go from, I want to say 45 railroads down to 6.
Oh, there we go.
Very, very quickly. You know, so you're down to six Class 1 railroads. The Class 1s are the really, really big ones, right? But one thing that happens, and you can see it on this map, everything on this map is a reduction in track, right? There's no new main lines except for one. It's in eastern Wyoming, between Donkey Creek and Shawnee Junction.
Eastern Wyoming. Here we are. So between here we are. So Donkey Creek and Shawnee Junction. This bit, it runs approximately north-south. Yes.
And so this is another one of those things that like changes everything. We'll go to the next slide on this.
Here we go.
One of the things which was completely verboten from, investors at this point, do not build new tracks, do not build new main lines. That's crazy. Don't do that, right? And you can only explain this through a counterexample, which is the Burlington Northern Railroad wanted to build about a 100-mile line out to the Powder River Basin in Wyoming to get all that sweet, sweet subbituminous coal. Right. And that's the line we just looked at there, right? And there was a shareholder revolt over this, right? Several members of the board resigned when they voted on building this thing, right? But the line did get built. Everyone thought it was crazy. And it was the single most profitable investment any railroad ever made.
Oh my god, it drives you crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh my god, we invested and good things happened.
Yes, exactly.
Revolutionary.
I think this is also like the first new main line built in America since the Lackawanna cutoff in 1916. And so there's this is assisted by some of the law of unintended consequences here, which is the Clean Air Act, right? Owing to regulating certain criteria pollutants, not including carbon dioxide, it was suddenly much, much cheaper to, instead of installing a stack scrubber in your coal power plant, you can burn this subbituminous Wyoming coal, and it's much less efficient, and you need a lot more of it, but it doesn't have as much sulfur or nitrous oxides in it. So, screw Appalachia. Let's get this Wyoming coal.
All of the Appalachian Mountains simply up. Just dig them up, and then send all of them in a train. And it doesn't matter if you need 20 trains instead of 3 trains, because goddamn, we're going to burn that stuff.
Yeah, they make ass loads of money off of this, and it generates ass loads of traffic. Right? We look at the next slide.
Yeah. Oh, there we are.
Yeah, you can see they're burning Wyoming coal as far out as New Jersey.
Yeah, crikey, here we are.
And then if you look at the traffic density generated by this on the next slide.
Oh, well, there we go.
Yep.
That's where you want a 6-track electrified freight main line. Good God.
Oh, no, you can't do that. Can't electrify.
You can't do anything. That's right. Sorry, partially single track diesel only.
Yeah, and then and that's because of course another thing we invent in this era, which is the excess height car.
Oh God, yeah. Here
Here's the
excess height car.
So, essentially, how do you run trains heavier, faster, so on and so forth? Well, you can make the train cars bigger, right? So these excess height cars become very commonplace. You can see a gigantic Norfolk Southern boxcar here for auto parts, right?
Yeah.
And then down here is an auto rack, also for moving cars, but finished ones, right? these excess height cars become like the standard car, right? And that precludes certain investments in the future, like electrification, just because you have to increase the height of so much infrastructure over the railroad
Yeah, I was going to say,
in
it
order to
takes up.
accommodate.
Yeah, you squeeze out whatever you can out of the existing loading gauge to just fit the physical train without any potential leftover space for, say, a pantograph or
Yeah,
some live electric overheads. So that, yeah, you've squeezed every drip of space you can, and as we'll get to, in some cases by singling tracks to centralize the track through a low bridge or whatever.
yes, under a low bridge or under a tunnel or something. So these excess height cars become basically standard everywhere, and this makes the number happy.
Yeah, makes the number happy. Don't require infrastructure investment. Hooray! I suppose you can renew these vehicles. You can basically treat these as like rolling stock renewals, right? So again, it's not counting as infrastructure as like capital investment. Yeah.
Exactly.
Happy days.
Another thing that happens, of course, and this is like 70s onwards, is containers,
Yeah.
right? We
Here
have
we go.
containers.
Here
We
are
have
some.
the stack train. The stack train is, these are more excess height cars. They are, one of the big things that happens here is the railroads focus on long, heavy trains, but also, unit trains, right? That go from terminal to terminal with one commodity or one kind of freight,
Yep.
right? So a long coal train or a long crude oil train or a long, gravel train or whatever, because you're maxing out the efficiency there, right? Containers are great for the railroad for this because they are, you go to a port, you pick up the containers and you bring them to an inland port, right? And although they have high value stuff in them, they're not very time sensitive because they just spent 2 weeks on a ship.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
Sure. Which is why I laugh when people suggest that a viable application of Hyperloop is for freight. Because no, it doesn't matter whether the thing takes 12 hours versus 2 hours. It's been on a
No
boat
one
for
gives a shit.
weeks. It doesn't
gives a
fucking
shit.
matter. Oh man. Anyway.
So yeah, these container trains are interesting because they also change how the railroad thinks about statistics. Because containers are really space inefficient compared to traditional rail cars. So modern railroads go for just straight up train length as opposed to ton miles per train hour. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, well,
but
on
this
the
is-
subject. Sorry, go on, Ross. You
Oh.
finish your point.
Oh no, you go ahead first.
I was going to say, we've both read the box, right? It's an interesting thing to read.
Yes.
I mean, it's well worth reading because it's just fascinating to
Yes.
sort of see that kind of side of supply chain history. But I'm in two minds about the box because it has made things and logistics better. In a way, it's made things more favourable for railroads than HGVs because actually, with a mixture of shipping and railroads, you end up with a very efficient way to move goods around, which brings the cost of goods down for people. And that's nice. That's good.
Yeah.
We want people to be able to afford nice things. That's fine. But also, it has rapidly decimated a large section of the workforce in a very uncontrolled way, and without much in the way of government sort of regulating it to make sure it didn't cause a huge amount of pain. So yeah, two minds about intermodal cars. I mean, I think it's good, but also it's resulted in because of the lack of because of capitalism and the lack of like government regulation. It's also resulted in enormous amounts of outsourcing and exploiting cheap labor in places where governments don't care. So
especially where you look at like how bad people in the drayage industry have been done by this. Drayage being that's when you move the container from the port to its customer.
Well, in the UK, for example, I think this was similar in the US. New ports that basically just didn't involve any unions were created and became successful. And then, so all the unionized work is one of the reasons why Liverpool, they've built their deep water port. But because all the dock workers remained a part of the traditional unions, they weren't able to be exploited. So Liverpool was never quite as successful as, say, I don't know, Felixstowe, that created itself by just omitting to have any unionized workforce whatsoever. Thankfully, that's changed, and they're striking and causing all manner of pain. But originally, I think it was basically a massive union bypass that enabled Felixstowe to kick itself off quite so successfully.
a lot of
bad.
drayage in the United States is run by almost like a gig economy thing,
Yeah, geez, yeah.
where they have like there's like a, you get paid, but you also have a rent to own program for your semi truck,
Yeah.
right?
Oh god.
So a lot of people are effectively get negative wages.
Just
So
yeah, dreadful. Yeah. You're
it's
earning,
really
and then
bad.
your money goes out. You pay for your truck, and you then have to sell your house. Not the best.
So I think one of the interesting things about containerization, especially in excess height cars, is there was one country on the North American continent, because Canada was doing a lot of the same things we were, but in Mexico they had a nationalized system, and they were trying something else, right? If we go to the next slide. So the Ferrocarril Nacional de Mexico was actually pursuing an electrification scheme that was going to go from Mexico City to, hold on, I can do this, Santiago de Querétaro, I want to say it is, right? That was supposed to go farther. It was going to be like a transcontinental thing on their most dense freight route, right? And they finished it. They built the electrification. They bought electric locomotives. They had some teething troubles where 2 trains whacked into each other and killed 4 people and destroyed 6 of the 10 locomotives.
Oh dear. No,
yeah.
not so good.
Yeah, that was not so good. But the whole thing was built out. And then
This is good. I'm seeing. This may be foreshadowing. I'm seeing an issue in these pictures, though.
yeah. The catenary hangers are facing the wrong way, huh?
Yeah, all the
Yeah.
cantilevers have been kicked to one side.
Yes.
Anyway, sorry. Continue.
Well,
dear.
And the other thing is, the Nacional de Mexico was very much, it provided, it was not just a railroad. It provided, social services and stuff to remote areas of Mexico. There was a whole lot of passenger service. There was all kinds of crazy stuff happening down there that we didn't have in America. The whole system was on a very different trajectory. Anyway, they privatized it in the 90s. Yeah.
Don't
and
do that, folks.
The electrified route was bought by TFM. I forget what that stands for. It was later absorbed into Kansas City Southern de Mexico, right? And they took one look at this electrification system, and they were like, yeah, fuck that. We're running double stacks. Tear down the wires, boys.
Oh, my God. How many years have those wires been up?
I think less than 10.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
It's a disease of the mind, everyone. A disease of the mind.
It's crazy. And also they canceled all the passenger trains in America. There are no passenger trains in Mexico now.
It's just absolutely wild. Just
outside of local trains out of some of the major cities.
Why did the privatization happen? Was it just sort of an energy within Mexico, or was it sort of partly pushed by the more broad sort of North American trade agreements and stuff? What was it entirely Mexico just doing a dum-dum like its northern cousins, or was there an element of wider North American politics at play?
All right. I bet it was NAFTA. I don't know specifically. I just looked up when was NAFTA passed and when was Nacional de Mexico privatized, and NAFTA was 1994 and Nacional de Mexico was privatized 1998. So I would
NAFTA.
guess.
Oh, it's NAFTA.
Yeah, it's NAFTA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
yep. That's Washington consensus strikes again.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. Oh,
this is something I want to do. I want to do an episode of Well, There's Your Problem on this at some point. Just the Mexican electrification program and the privatization. Because it'll be the
winciest episode of WTYP there's ever been. Everyone will just be wincing their bones inside out, watching it because of the inevitability of the stupid. Yeah. Oh golly.
Yeah. There was a way out. There was a different way to go. No.
F. Get rid of that. Yeah.
Get rid of that.
But right, brief interlude. We're oh my God, we're an hour and a half in, which is lovely. It's fine. It was going to be a long one. We've got the two of us on, and we what are we like? Just as a brief interlude, I'm drinking Funky Drummer from 71 Brewing Company, which is very nice actually. It's brewed in Dundee in Scotland. It's a D IPA. I don't know what a dipper is.
It's a double IPA.
Oh, it's a double IPA. Thank you, Roz.
Yes.
And I'm about to drink a Madison West Coast IPA, which again it's actually Scottish. It's another Scottish beer. But I'm looking forward to this. I'm gonna open this. I'm gonna get the authentic. There we go. Just so people think it's real. I'm also drinking this out of the APT mug. Thanks, Simon. Because it's only right. What are you drinking, by the way?
I have my favorite beer.
Ooh.
It is called The Shape of Hops to Come. It is from the Chamonix Creek Brewing Company, and it is an Imperial IPA, which is the same as a double IPA, but you want to use a different word.
Yeah, to be fair, Imperial. There is something sinister about an Imperial IPA. I will say that. But the Chamonix Creek, you've mentioned the Chamonix Creek before. I think you must have been drinking on another episode, possibly a WTYP episode.
I drink a lot of these.
Will you feed me a Chamonix Creek Imperial IPA when I visit Philly?
Absolutely. We can go up to the brewery. It's a good brewery.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes, please. That sounds amazing. Right. Anyway, sorry. It was a brief digression, everyone. But cheers. That's a nice color, actually. It's quite amber for a West Coast IPA. Okay.
Yeah.
It's nice. Sorry, Ross. Let's do this.
All right. Well, okay. Well, I guess we're getting into like the modern history now. Some of the stuff that directly led up, although we did a lot of long history there. The thing to keep in mind here is while the railroads are shedding services and disinvesting, the job is still like tolerable to do.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
This is still like something that, you know, as much as the railroads are disinvesting, like this is still like you can be a railroader and live. And so we'll start talking about some of the stuff that happened really in the last 20 years, where as the railroads have been disinvesting, it has made it much harder for workers. Yeah. One of which is on the next slide. Wide adoption of what's called distributed power, right? So the idea is, all right, you have a long freight train. You have a lot of in-train forces, right? Because there's slack in the couplers. There's you might have heavy cars and light cars. All kinds of stuff can happen. That the practical limitation there is you can't run trains that are too long.
Yeah, because it just all sorts of bad things. The bad things will happen.
Bad things happen, yeah. But a really long, heavy train is something that makes the numbers happy. So that's why railroads have always been trying to run longer and longer trains. So this thing called distributed power shows up, and this is really invented in the 60s, but not widely adopted until surprisingly recently. Rather than having a bunch of locomotives up front, which are all controlled by two guys, we can use radio equipment to have locomotives in the middle and the back of the train also controlled by the two guys at the front, right? And so this means your risk of certain kinds of derailments, the string line derailment in particular, is much reduced because you can adjust like the slack, the in-train forces over the length of the whole train much more easily.
Yeah, all sorts of clever electrical controls and time delay stuff that mean that you can make sure that you always got exactly the right amount of tension in the couplers, right?
Exactly. And so this means, you could use this to run trains you already have more safely, or what if we made trains 3 times as long?
What if that, Roz? What if that?
What if that? So train length goes from like 100 cars on average to 250 cars on average. So distributed power, these DPUs, they're used everywhere now. I noticed them really starting to show up on CSX like about 4 years ago, and I was like, oh, they're using distributed power. And then I was like, these trains are a lot longer than they used to be. Wow.
Yeah. Oh, golly.
So this is something which is not directly related to, and in fact directly interferes with the next thing we're going to talk about, which is precision scheduled railroading.
Oh god, yeah, here we go. So
Yeah.
we're on the slide, a slide that may be familiar to
Yeah,
people who've already binged WTYP, but we're going there, folks. Because also, I'm glad we are going there because this, I have to say, I found this your explanation, Roz, was instructive on the thing we're about to talk about. It's really good.
Yes, and precision scheduled railroading. We've done spiels about E. Hunter Harrison before. We've done spiels about he implemented this management style called precision scheduled railroading. The idea is that rather than focus on moving trains, you focus on moving cars. You have the idea is you have trains that run on schedules, very strict ones, and which bypass intermediate terminals and instead bring cars directly to the destinations, right? And this should theoretically produce a better railroad that runs better for everyone, right? And this is something that should actually reduce stress on crews because there would be more trains that are scheduled as opposed to having trains that are on the extra board or having trains in pools where you could be called up at any time, right? It should make shippers happier because they know when their stuff's coming in time, and especially in our sort of modern world of lean production where stuff has to show up just in time. Yeah, this seems like the way to go, right?
Yeah, instinctively feels like a good thing, right?
Yeah, this seems like what we should be doing. Now, the way it's been implemented is bad.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we're going there, folks.
This is I would say a complicated issue to look at holistically, right? But combining PSR with the amount of deferred maintenance, the amount of infrastructure reductions, it's not compatible.
So there's some things. So before we jump to the next slide, there are some things on this slide that we have to everyone should write down in your copybooks, right?
I was about to say, there's two in particular with which are one's related to excess height cars, the other was related to using less infrastructure. Yeah. So up here in the corner, upper which corner?
This corner here. Which
I'm doing exactly. So this is Thurman, West Virginia, right? And Thurman, West Virginia used to be a big coaling station on the Chesapeake and Ohio. Gareth, when you come to the United States, you're going to get to go here or go through here. So what you're seeing here is there's a double track main line through the Appalachians along the New River, right? And this goes from whatchamacallit. It goes through like the Chemical Valley in West Virginia and stuff like that, or if you're more cynical, the Cancer Valley.
Yeah.
And this used to be like a really big coal route. Now it sees a lot fewer coal trains, and I think like one manifest train a day. Manifest is like a mixed freight train, and it also sees Amtrak's Cardinal, which goes the slow way from New York to Chicago. So what you're seeing here is a double track main line that goes down to one track and then goes back up to two tracks.
There you go. So it's splitting into two tracks either side of my little triangles that I've just put here.
Yes. Because ordinarily, if you want to do a crossover here, because one line goes on one side of the New River, the other line goes on the other, but they both meet back up again. Ordinarily, what you would do here if you needed a crossover is you would do what Gareth drew down here.
Yes.
And you have two tracks continuous and you have four switches.
Yeah. But that involves four switches. So that's
four switches that you have to maintain.
2, 3, 4.
So
why do that when you can get rid of this bit?
You can, you could just get rid of two of the switches and maintain slightly less track.
Yeah. You know what's funny is that this is in York. There's one of these in York Station, like near me.
Incredible.
Because on the Scarborough line, what was two tracks, exactly as we've just drawn, is now. In fact, I'll scrub this and show you what this now looks like, which is it now does this. Up, up, like that. And now you've only got 2 switches to maintain. It makes sense.
10 seconds before I can see it.
Yes, you'll see this momentarily. Yeah, everyone, OBS decided to update and kill all of the apps that make things work. So thanks, OBS. I loved you until you did this. Why do you cause me pain? Anyway, that was my filler material so that Ross can catch up. It does this. Which, there used to be a double track. They got rid of it because on paper that looks good to create efficiencies because you've halved the maintenance requirements. Except what you've done is make a crappier railway that is harder to schedule things over and does not work if you want to run more services.
Yes.
This is bad.
So this is one of the things which has reduced the capacity of American railroads. Another one is, of course, we use excess height cars. So down here we see, I believe this is the Howard Street Tunnel in Baltimore. It used to be 2-track, but now we have tall cars. So this is where the first electrification in America was, by the way.
Sad.
Rather than do something expensive like, I don't know, digging out the bottom of the tunnel or, running smaller cars, they simply move the track to the center of the tunnel where there's the most clearance, right? And only run 1 track through this previously 2-track tunnel. Yeah. There's one of these in Philly, too, that goes under the Art Museum. Used to be 2-track. Now it's down to 1-track. And that means CSX is constantly idling big diesel locomotives, waiting for access to the tunnel, right in like a residential area. And also like, the DPU, which is like half a mile or a mile back, is idling in the middle of Children's Hospital.
Oh, my God.
It's great. It's incredible.
Also, I spotted something in this picture, and I was kind of like, I had an itchy trigger finger on the chat in the W2RP episode. Is this an old like OLE base? What is this?
Wait,
is
where?
This question mark?
Oh, hold on. I haven't seen what you've been highlighting.
I have
yet.
Circled the little concrete base on the bottom black and white picture with the tunnel where the tracks have been centralised. There is what appears to be like an oily mast base. Was this like formerly electrified and then unelectrified?
Yes, this was the Howard Street Tunnel was the first mainline electrification, I believe, ever.
So that's what this was, and now gone. That's gone.
Gone. Yep.
It's gone. You don't need electrification. It's
don't
bad.
Need electrification.
It's obviously a bad thing, so you have to get rid of it. Anyway, right. So with all of this, I'm not going to do any more sketching in the bottom corner here. You'll be glad to know, everyone. No more sketching because I have prepared. I've prepared a thing. Here it is. Roz, you're going to see it in 10 seconds. It's an emulation of a sketch that you did. You John Maddened this. I've pre second guessed the John Maddening. And I'm going to be your John Maddening pen while we make an explanation of why some of these compromises result in a much worse operational situation, particularly for workers.
Yeah, so I would say precision scheduled railroading and really long trains directly conflict with each other, but the railroads have really gone for the really long train aspect. And so that's why it's been seen as sort of a euphemism for cost cutting as opposed to like a better way to run a railroad because it's mostly just the long trains. Anyway, so let's say I got 2 terminals here and I got to move 150 cars each way over this railroad, right? Some of this railroad is double track, right? But most of it is passing sidings. And those passing sidings have a length of 75 cars, right? So the old way to do this, we're going to run 4 trains of 75 cars, right? And that means I need 4 crews, and I'm giving them 1 day of pay each. Because we've been in lean production for a while, I'm sure that includes some overtime. So anyway, we have precision scheduled railroading shows up, and also our monster trains, right? We can run these longer trains. But our passing sidings are the same length. Now, theoretically, what you do under PSR, maybe you combine the passing sidings so they're longer, or you build more track or something. But I don't know. What if we do this on the cheap, right? I call up 2 crews, and 1 crew takes 150 car train to the end of the double track, and then they stop, and then they wait for the other train there, and they sort of twiddle their thumbs for 6 hours, right?
The
Because
train goes,
all these,
up
exactly.
here, and then it goes back again all this
Yeah.
way. And then it goes back here, and then the tail end, at some point in the indeterminate future, the tail of this train is going to go back this way, freeing up the tracks, right?
Yeah, so this crew is just sitting there at the end of the double track, and they're doing nothing. They're not allowed to do anything because there's in-cab surveillance, of course. But the other train that's also 150 cars going the other way makes it the full way. But the first crew is now timed out, so you got to call another crew out at 1 a.m. in the morning, right? And they got to take the first train to the other terminal, right? So by increasing congestion and paying a crew to do nothing for 6 hours, you've only paid 3 crews where you would pay 4 crews before.
And lo and behold, the spreadsheet is happy.
The number's very happy about this.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, once you're running these long trains that don't fit in passing sidings, if there were, let's say, an M-track train that was coming through, a passenger train, and you're like, well, we should probably route the fast passenger train around the slow freight train. You can't do it.
Nope.
It's physically impossible with the infrastructure you have, right? So this makes everyone mad except investors.
Because
you're wasting people.
All your passengers are stuck in a passing loop. Your crew just has their lives ruined.
Yes.
No one except the shareholders are happy.
Yeah, the shippers are mad, the crews are mad, passengers are mad, everyone's mad. The locomotives are probably mad.
Yeah. Oh my god, yeah. It's just not the way to run a railroad at all.
And this is compounded by, like, okay, what is precision scheduling, right? Which is our next slide here.
Let's do this. Here we go.
So, theoretically, if I have precision scheduled railroading, I have precise schedules, right? So, you have a train that leaves one terminal at a fixed time and then goes down the main line and arrives at its destination at a fixed time, right? That's what we see sort of on our first diagram here. And if there's a train that's going the other way, I know where I'm going to meet that train. That's where I build the passing siding, right?
Yeah. Which is, by the way, how all freight works in the UK. Like,
right.
we do not have the capacity to do anything other than this. Yeah.
So the reality is, our precision schedules have a precision of about, there's like 2 hours of error bars on both sides.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right. So we see on the second diagram, there's a range of times where these trains might meet each other. So either you build a really long passing siding to compensate, or double track, or you have to delay a train and you don't know which one you're going to delay.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a situation that has a significant amount of randomness. And this is also sort of compounded by the fact that yard crews right now are under a lot of stress because the railroads have, rather than trying to get stuff done quicker with more people, they've asked people to just inspect the cars more quickly. Just like, let us get this train out of the yard, please.
Yeah, but also you'll be sacked if anything happens. Like, it's your responsibility if it goes wrong, but also do it in much less time. Go. And also, if we don't like your performance, we'll sack you.
Yeah, but even if the trains leave on time, there's enough randomness added into the network by all these problems that we get stuff like on the next slide here.
Here we go. Oh, this is today's slides. I spotted this is
yeah, exactly. Well, this is data that was compiled by rail fans because the railroads will never let you see this data.
Yeah,
because no one would ship with them if they saw it.
Yeah. Everyone, Chuffernutters / Greisers / band nerds / book holding train spotters are good, actually. Mm-hmm. They allow us to get access to data that otherwise we'd never get hold of.
Exactly. So this is a plot of train arrival times at Horseshoe Curve, which we showed much earlier in the presentation, right? Unofficial ones compiled by rail fans. When certain freight trains with certain symbols showed up at Horseshoe Curve every day for a year. And you notice that of these 3 trains on this first graph here, there's a pretty wide distribution, especially on train 20W, which is just a straight up normal distribution.
Yeah,
it's a bell curve.
It's just a normal distribution of the whole thing.
Yeah. It's like, it might show. Yeah, it's really bad.
Yeah.
Now, 20W in this case, 20W is a train which is a continuation of a Burlington Northern Santa Fe Z train. The Z trains are some of the highest priority trains in the country. They haul all your Amazon shit from the Port of Los Angeles to the East Coast. And that should theoretically run on a very strict schedule.
Are those the ones that were getting ram raided in that when they were in that short section of track on the?
No, I think the Z train would be trailers on flat cars, not containers.
Okay.
So that was going to the Los Angeles Inland Port. That's another aspect of having these very, very long trains. They don't fit in the yard, and then they get robbed.
Yeah.
So,
oh dear.
If you're running precision scheduled railroading, you don't want a train that can show up at any hour of the day. And this is one of the reasons crews really get screwed and why they're on call always, because you don't know where the train is going to be.
If we hop back to the example you gave in the sketch, right? So we got this crew where we've got this crew change that just randomly at some point because they've timed out. That could be anywhere, right? That
anywhere.
Could be anywhere. It could be at any time of day. And if you're the reserve crew, you just have to have your phone on the whole time. And you go back to this the 20W here, this blue one that's just is a normal distribution. You have absolutely no control of your life. How is this a viable way to have a? This is not an acceptable way to treat staff.
And when this stuff happens, I mean, you're on call. You get like 2 hours notice at best to wake up, sober up, get down to the terminal. All right, park your car. Get in the shitty van. The shitty van drives down 65 miles of dirt roads next to the railroad, and then all right, get in the locomotive, go drive it somewhere, and then the shitty van brings the other crew back, it's crazy.
Everyone's knackered. 50% of the crews get killed in a road traffic collision on the way back.
Exactly.
Everyone's exhausted. Fatigue management is absolutely critical. And it's like a worthwhile point that the majority of people who work on the railways who get killed or get severely injured, they suffer those injuries in the car on the way back, in the van on the way back, because they're fatigued, right? I bet that's the same here.
I remember hearing a story, I forget from where or from who, of a railroad engineer. He was driving home late at night, and he got to a red light, and he thought he was still driving the train, and was like, oh, stop and proceed, right? So then he drove through the intersection very slowly, 15 miles an hour, and he got pulled over by a cop. And he was like, I'm sorry, I'm a railroad engineer. I haven't been drinking. I just forgot I wasn't driving a train.
Yeah, I'm so fatigued and my brain is so addled. I think I'm in a train. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, for sure.
All right, our second chart. So these are trains coming from the west, I believe, on our first chart here. Our second train are westbound trains that originate at Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, right? Harrisburg is about 100 miles east of Altoona, where the Horseshoe Curve is. And there's already like 3 hours of distribution in when they show up on average. These delays really, really stack up.
Yeah,
because there's so much randomness, and there's so much you can't. Where are the schedules? Where are the schedules?
Yeah. What's this? Where's the precision in these schedules?
Where's the precision? Where's the schedules?
Oh my goodness! Yeah, it's just not, and it means this. We talk about there is value in optimizing infrastructure,
Yes.
You can't do that where you have a system looking like this, right?
Yes, you can't do anything. This is one of the reasons why this is one of the busiest main lines in America, and this is why so between Harrisburg and Pittsburgh, there is one Amtrak train a day,
Yeah.
and they are currently running studies to do a second one.
Oh my God.
And in order to account for all this randomness, they have to invest like $300 and something million into extra tracks just to run a second Amtrak train a day.
So this actually, it's worth. So we had a question actually, which I think maybe is interesting to pick up on this. And let me know. Like you might have an idea on this. This is from Remy Cardona. Hello, Remy. Question for Roz: how's the Florida East Coast doing with respect to this for Brightline? How does Brightline work in relation to the freight around it?
Florida East Coast has historically been run by insane people. I want to start with that. And basically, what they do is they run every single freight train very tightly scheduled at 60 miles an hour, like big, long gravel trains and everything. That railroad is run completely different from every other railroad in America, and they're upgrading everything to double track. They're doing so much crap down there. It's crazy.
So they're actually doing good things. So that's how they're making it work, by actually doing the stuff they need to.
Yeah, by running the trains good. you can just run the trains good instead of doing it bad. You could run the trains good. I know it's bigger on a bigger railroad. FEC does have the advantage that it's a straight line 2-track main line, and they hand off cars in like Jacksonville or wherever to the class ones. But again, they figured out how to run the trains good.
Besquickelhausen points out completely non-union though.
I believe they have reunionized. Brightline is non-union, but I think Florida East Coast Railroad itself is union.
Okay, interesting. Okay, Brightline, get on that. Workers of Brightline, make it happen.
Yeah. I was about to say, it's we'll see hopefully a big union boom sometime soon.
Yes. Anyway, sorry, I digress. Thanks for the questions. Do keep chucking them in at me so I can spot them. Roz and I are keen to take your questions. It's fun stuff. Anyway, right. So you might want to scoot them up to the end because we'll definitely do a bit of a Q&A kind of catch up at the end. But anyway, right, we shall proceed and make progress. So shall we jump to the next one?
I'll go to the next one. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, right, yeah.
Yeah, the big issue here is that all this shit is working.
Oh my God, this is the worst thing.
In terms of
by
revenue,
their measures, oh my God.
In terms of revenue, all this disinvestment and stuff. Look at how much money you're making per mile versus back in 1916 when you had a lot more mileage. Like, oh my God, all these railroads are like fucking. They're making money hand over fist. I mean, I want to say. Class 1 railroads put up profits of $66 billion last year. One nasty statistic is since 2010, with the operating ratio so low as they are, most railroads are down below 60% now. It used to be 80% was good. Now 60% is good. They've done, I want to say, $196 billion in stock buybacks. And dividend payouts.
Why are they not investing? They're making so much money, like just an insane, like more money than they could possibly spend on infrastructure upgrades. So why don't they spend some of that money on infrastructure upgrades?
There are some infrastructure upgrades happening, but they're like really. It's just because the clearances are too low for double stacks.
Oh my God.
That's like all of it. It's not like increasing capacity or anything. But they could. It's like
with the money they're making, they could redouble every line. Invest in maintenance. Just put a maintenance. They could basically invest some of that money in the long term and pay for maintenance off the interest. And they could electrify everything. They could do all of that with like 1 year of profit. They literally could
electrify everything.
Yeah. They could literally pay for the electrification of every mile with that kind of money. Like, it's just wild.
it's such a crazy amount of money that just goes to. I mean, the dividend is one thing. The stock buybacks are the really insulting part.
Just, yeah, absolutely. By the way, everyone, just in case you were wondering, capitalism is just an absolutely insane way to structure society and structure the way that our society functions. And that's the root cause of all of this, for God's sake. Mm-hmm. Anyway, right. Sorry, on screen for the audio-only people, on screen is a graph. The left-hand axis is route miles. The right-hand axis, the left-hand y-axis is route miles. The right-hand y-axis is revenue per mile. The per mile revenue is basically rocketing upwards exponentially and really takes a shooter in the kind of the mid to late 70s is when it upturns. And in the late 70s is when the other line, the blue line here, which is just how many miles of network there are, goes the opposite direction and just like falls through the floor. And interestingly, we often see graphs like this in the UK relating like mileage to relating to everyone calls them the Beecham cuts, but the klaxon would go off right now because they're not. They're the cuts that government made through the middle of the 20th century to the rail network. Some of which was fair enough because it was pointless competition between companies, but a lot of it was actually providing a service to people that is now gone, and we're now battling over how to reinstate a lot of it. And a lot of people go, oh, look, privatisation happened in 1993, and that means that's why there's so much more ridership on the rail network. It's like, nope, much bigger, and this is to answer a question that happened much earlier, by the way. I did see the question, I'm not ignoring it. Going, the reason that the UK had that big upsurge in the mid-80s is, well, partly because the rail network got British Rail really had things down by the mid-80s. Like, British Rail were running an incredibly effective rail system by the mid-80s. Like, okay, sure, lots of bits of it were still crummy, but they were running, like, really, it was a very efficient system and running pretty decent service. But also, frankly, it's bigger than the railroads. Like, it's bigger than the railways. And I suppose this might be the same in the US. The massive upsurge in passenger ridership, it sounds like in the US as well, comes from bigger things than the railways. Like, just people wanted to travel around. They had more disposable income. They were commuting they were in places and working types of jobs that meant that the commute might suit a rail commute. And so there was a demand for that kind of travel. Also, people got more aware of their sorts of journeys they were doing. Road usage had got saturated by the kind of the mid to late 80s, certainly in the UK, and it got congested and traffic was shit, and people wanted to actually maybe ride a train, and were becoming environmentally aware. So all these big effects, but particularly around the fact that people had a little bit more disposable income by the mid to late 80s, means that rail ridership was booming in certainly the UK, and I guess maybe that I don't know, Roz, were those macro effects some of the ones that were acting in the US as well?
So. It's interesting because the railroads are hauling less freight now than they were in 2000.
Oh, okay.
They have still been shedding traffic. Mm-hmm. There's certainly a demand for railroad service, but it's really increasingly going to stuff that really can't go on a truck, like hazmat and like a really huge bulk commodities. Yeah. I mean, this I would. And then passenger rail ridership has been going up recently, or was at least until COVID.
Yeah.
But that's only on areas where you can provide service.
Service, yeah.
Yeah, service which isn't completely stupid. Like,
like the Cleveland, like the Cleveland service. I think Jay was talking about earlier, which is like what 2 nights. In fact, we talked about this, and I think in the last. Oh no, we were talking about Cincinnati, weren't we? But the fact that some of these cities, these massive cities, have like 2 trains a week, or like maybe 2 trains a day, but both of them are in the middle of the night or something like that.
Yes, Cleveland has 3 trains a week each way. They get in. Oh, excuse me. Cincinnati has 3 trains a week each way, which get in at 2 a.m, and then Cleveland has 2 daily trains, which I think get in at 1 and 4 a.m. in the morning, respectively.
That's not a rail service. That's not a thing.
The Ohio governors have long said, well, Ohioans don't ride the train. That's why we don't need a train, even though they have the most obvious rail corridor in America is Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland. Yeah. We're not going to do that. Yeah. It was actually in the original Amtrak plan.
Oh, okay.
to keep
Yeah.
that, the one that was drawn up by McKinsey and Company and then shown to McKinsey and Company, of course, infamous for destroying and cutting business. And then they showed it to the Nixon administration, and the Nixon administration was like, "Yeah, cut that by 2/3. Come on."
Oh my God. Yeah.
So
Such pain.
it's so painful. I don't know, and I think that's also one of the things which really contributed to how bad it's gotten. Then I
Yeah.
don't, I, you know, I maybe if there's a grand unified theory of railroad operations, it's that you need passenger trains to keep the freight trains disciplined.
Oh, yeah, that's a very interesting point. Yeah, okay, yeah. I can believe that definitely worked in the so obviously the UK has a totally different railroad in terms of like the mixture of traffic. But
Yeah.
actually if you go back to the end of the 1800s, I think probably you can see that comparison of like the freight uh, the dominance of freight and that battle of passenger services. Yeah, that is the grand unified theory. I like it. I like it.
Yeah,
Right.
places like Russia or like India or like China don't have these problems,
Yeah.
because they have to schedule around the passenger trains, and the passenger trains have to have at least some semblance of being on time.
Yeah, they have to be functional. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I rode trains into Mumbai, which is one of the world's most insane and massive cities. And
Ooh.
oh my god, the scale of the first thing we did was get a bus across to a station from the airport. We landed in Mumbai airport, got the bus across to a commuter station, and then got on a commuter train. And immediately I was stood next to an open door going at 70 miles an hour.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it was the good stuff, and also it was sardine cans. So Dina, I made sure like Dina was standing like 2 meters and 100 people away from me, and I was stood holding on to like a cow loop, with just the outside world going past me at 60 to 70 miles an hour, in a pretty well built EMU. Fair play. Like that's the sort of EMU that would happily just bulldoze a bulldozer block without any problems. But yeah, that was quite an experience, and they
always the
run an
thing.
impressively useful railway, and also there was freight going past. There was also freight on that railway. Amazing.
The thing about Indian railways, which always impresses me. I've never been there. I've only seen videos, but it's like it's not so much the speed of the train, but the violence of the speed.
Yes, yes.
I want to go there, but I'm sure I would be killed on the Indian railways, doing something stupid.
Mumbai is an amazing city to visit. I would strongly recommend if people want it. If people, I was out there for a reason. If people have some reason to be making that kind of a long journey, but definitely do it at some point in your life. It's well worth just experiencing humanity on another level. Mumbai is like that, amazing. But also the railways are kind of cool. Like they've got that broad gauge, and the commuter services are incredible, and it's pretty epic. Anyway, a digression. Let's jump to the next slide.
Okay.
Oh my god, it's the Matrix. Right.
So
Okay.
one of the things I think is sometimes proposed is, all right, we have all these horrible working conditions, and we're running these trains in all these different ways, and maybe one of the ways we can try and improve this is computers. Beep boop, right?
Yeah.
Beep,
The
beep,
computer
beep.
can fix the problem.
Yeah, we could try and automate these trains, right? We could have some level of automation there. Now the truth is, stuff like automatic train control is ancient technology. Stuff like automatic train stop they had that on steam locomotives.
That's not.
Yeah,
New. Yeah, it's not new at all.
It's not new at all.
Yeah.
There's a reason why it hasn't been implemented on the wider American railroad network, and that's because management is lazy.
Yeah.
I think
we could do these things. That's fine.
could-
Like it's
we
doable.
could.
Yeah.
I think there is a really big theme here, which is management of railroads is lazy.
Yeah. Do nothing, make the money. That's the ethos of railroad management, right?
But what some recent locomotives have been equipped with, there's two systems that you could call like a railroad auto throttle, right? These are like so there's two systems. There's leader and there's trip optimizer, right? And these are essentially for optimizing the freight trains for fuel economy, right? So our 3-mile long train is now being controlled by a computer for the sake of fuel economy. Now both these systems work differently. I believe Trip Optimizer don't quote me on this because a lot of this is the narrative around these systems is very tightly controlled by locomotive manufacturers.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
So
because this is the magic wizard that they deploy to say that they're doing technology and modernism and innovation.
this is the wizard they installed in every locomotive. So Trip Optimizer, which I want to say is the GE one, or former GE, now Wabtec, because the locomotive industry is collapsing, is it's sort of like they manually program in what the train should be doing at certain points along the route, right? So you have a fixed start point, a fixed end point, and then there's a program for how to manage the train over that period, and then you as the locomotive engineer are supposed to let it do its thing unless it's doing something obviously wrong, which it does frequently. But also you can be disciplined for not letting it run as it wants to for too much of the time, because you're wasting the railroad's money, because you're using too much fuel, preventing the train from derailing. The other system is Leader, and this one's a piece of work. It runs on machine learning.
Okay. Machine learning works sometimes when you have enormous volumes of data. I'm going to go with there is not nearly enough data for it to actually function for, the number of train services running in the US. I don't think that's enough data for it to actually be a thing.
It's been trained on simulators mostly.
Oh, that's a bit like the machine learning that was hunting for like child cancer based on X-rays, and it was identifying it with 100% hit rate because all of the data that had the successful, like the actual cancer identification, in the corner of the X-ray image it had like the address of the hospital. And the machine learning was identifying the address of the hospital in the corner, and the other data had a different address. Like, it's that sort of thing. Like, oh my god, learn basic data training ethics, folks. Anyway,
so it's like we forced a bot to play 9,000 hours of Microsoft Train Simulator. Let's see how it does on the real Marias Pass, right? And this, one of the things is that if you have a machine learning system like this, presumably you want it to learn. Someone mentioned this in a comment on our last Well, There's Your Problem, the one about battery electric locomotives. That if you're doing a machine learning system, presumably you want the engineer to take over when it's doing something wrong, and the machine learning system can learn from it, right? But the railroads want their fuel economy, so you're not allowed to take over unless there's like some actual problem that's going to occur, or like if there's if it's a place where it's known to split or derail trains, and there's more than a couple spots where it is known to everyone, if you let these automated systems go, they will derail or split a train there. Notably, Horseshoe Curve has had a lot of derailment problems that it never had before over the past 2 years, and there's and these trains derail in front of God and everyone on the virtual railfan camera, as well as the little observation point there that's a tourist trap.
Oh my god. Yeah.
So there's basically no scrutiny of any kind over these systems. It is Tesla full self-driving beta for trains, but it's been around for about 5 years now. And this is another one of these things where, if you are a railroad worker, in addition to all the fatigue, in addition to the no days off, in addition to all this crap you have to deal with, the surveillance, everything, you are put in a dilemma of, all right, do I take over the train from the dumb computer? Or do I let and possibly get disciplined for it? Or do I let it do a stupid thing and split the train, or God forbid derail it, and then they can write it up as a mechanical failure, and I'm fine unless I'm killed in the derailment, of course.
Oh my god, just yeah.
I just noticed in the chat from Uncritical Simon, I think there's a fully automated freight line in Australia. There is. It runs iron ore. It's an iron ore line, so all the trains are very consistent weight, and they are very consistent they run over the same line. It's like a conveyor belt.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a conveyor belt. It's doing.
Yeah,
I mean, it is doing what railroads do best, which is exactly the same thing to the meter and minute, repeatedly.
Yes.
Which is good for track alignment design. It's good for the system that you describe, because you can basically just program. You don't need to machine learn it. You just program it in, right? You just program in. Well, on this minute of the journey, you're going to be at 60 miles an hour, and you're going to need to go to zero throttle and then coast for this long, and blah 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 blah. Yeah, for sure.
A lot of those, there was a fully automated coal line at the Navajo mine until I think a year ago or so. Or no, I think it's still fully automated. They just converted it to diesel instead of electric.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah.
So there's certain forms of railroad that are very easy to automate, and general merchandise freight is not one of them.
No. Metro lines are that, where you're particularly while you're building a new system. Mixed freight, no, absolutely not. It's just no.
You need a guy with a brain to do it.
You need someone with a load of skills
brain.
that it's impossible for a computer to understand.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there are so many variables. Oh, the traction conditions given the weather, the traction conditions given the pressure, the traction conditions given the health of the locomotive. Also, the type, the length of the train, knowing how much mass is in the train. All those variables. It might sound like you can program them into a computer. You cannot.
My idiot yard foreman built the train wrong, so I have to compensate for that. Stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And also things like knowing that there's slight eccentricities on the track. Actually, I know that they've done this thing to the track, or there's a wet spot that I have to deal with there, so I have to bring the speed down, otherwise I'll get a rough ride and risk a derailment. Have fun getting the computer to get all that stuff into it without it just like exploding. It's not going to happen.
I don't think the computer is going to be able to deal with the wrong kind of snow.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, these computer systems, they are overseen by a two-man crew. But what if we went down to one-man crews?
Ooh. Yeah, I wonder what that would do to the conditional formatting in my spreadsheet.
Well, it'd be half as expensive to run the train. But this has been like the big bugbear for a long time that the railroads have wanted to do for a while. It's like, okay, we're gonna go down to one-man crews because you only need one guy to drive the train, right?
Yeah.
It's essentially you have a conductor and the engineer. The engineer drives the train. The conductor's in charge of it. But what if we went down to one guy who was in charge of the train and drove the train?
Yeah, that's a good thing, right? That definitely is going to be fine for that individual's health and well-being.
Yeah, one guy constantly surveilled in the cab of the locomotive, who's expected to sit at attention constantly. And this is, I think someone on Twitter recently made the point that the one-man crew thing is more of something to hold over labor than something the railroads could practically do. Just because you don't have the signaling for it, you don't have the track for it, you don't have there's all these aspects of it where it would be basically impossible to run a one-man crew with the type of reliability issues that freight trains have right now.
I was going to say, because obviously there are a lot of people in the chat right now saying, this is how the UK run, or GB. I always need to correct myself because I'm not including Northern Ireland in that, although it is the case in Northern Ireland generally. But in terms of GB, we run our trains with a single, they're single staffed. We have a one-person crew in those trains. But that's because we have a certain level of system reliability on the infrastructure. We have a certain level of, we have signaling, which
you
some of the US railroads don't.
Yeah, if you're running a 3-mile freight train over 200 miles of dark territory with paper orders, I don't know if you want one guy to be in charge of that.
You do not want one driver in that train. Not least because I think after I would absolutely definitely go nuts in that cab after the first 100 miles. Something would snap inside me after my first shift and I'd probably be found like hanging from a tree in my pajamas or something. Like it wouldn't go well.
I'm thinking if you're like in one of these situations where you're stuck at a red signal for 8 hours and it's just you there twiddling your thumbs, right? The other thing about that is, what do you do when someone has to go to the bathroom?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I suppose you pull the train up, you just pull it to a halt, and you get out. That way, that's the safe way to do it, right? Pull the train up completely, get out, have a little waz, pop back in, happy days. That definitely won't mean that you'd be immediately sacked and then lose your whole livelihood.
Okay, I got to tell this story. This is tangential to current labor relations, but this is also why crews called Norfolk Southern the Nazi Southern, and that's the poop bags.
Oh God!
So locomotives have toilets on them. Pretty much all of them do. They vary in quality. Newer ones are better. Canadian locomotives also have coffee machines on them. Their unions have negotiated that, which
union stuff
nice.
And also French heritage. That's got to be the French influence, surely.
That sounds about right. Yeah. So anyway, Norfolk Southern decided, I want to say in the 90s, they were like, we don't want to maintain these locomotive toilets anymore. This is annoying. So they started welding them shut, right? Oh. They welded the door shut to the toilet. Oh. And then they were like, well, if you need to go, just use this little baggie. We'll give you a little baggie there.
Please tell me that those baggies became projectiles at the offices of the railway.
Well, they didn't at the railway, but people who are fed up just threw them out of the locomotive, and people keep finding these poop baggies next to the right of way, right? And people started calling up Norfolk Southern and complaining. So the solution here was not to
make the toilet work again.
You had to get a numbered poop baggie.
Oh my God!
And if you used it, you had to turn it in to your supervisor at the end of the run.
I mean, I laugh, but that's the sort of thing that would absolutely justify a variety of varying degrees of murder.
I was about to say, I am surprised there was not a mass shooting in Roanoke.
Yeah, good grief. That's when to commit mass arson on a headquarters of a railroad. Ideally using flaming Molotov cocktails filled with the poop bags.
This has since been remedied. They have toilets on the locomotives again. They're still bad. Lots of crews will just stop the train at a railroad crossing and go use the bathroom at a gas station. but like it's the disrespect from management for freight rail crews knows no bounds.
It's Oh my God, yeah. You've got me thinking about things that go the opposite end of the spectrum, which is, for example, that TGV drivers in France and indeed Eurostar, and I checked this by finding there is a Eurostar, or there is a TMST, the Class 373 kind of original Eurostar trains. Was one of those power cars in the college that I taught at for a while, and this is a hanger-on from the TGV drivers who get a wine fridge in every locomotive, in every cab. They get a wine fridge and they get to have wine in their train. Whether they drink that wine and how that works, I don't know. That I think the laws get a little bit fuzzy on that one. But they have fought for and get a wine fridge in their trains, and I confirmed this by finding the wine fridge in the Eurostar power car. So it is
very
true.
Nice.
That's nice. I wouldn't necessarily want a 186 mile an hour, or rather even like a 225 mile an hour train with a wine imbibed driver, but I also think that union power is good. So who's to say what's the bad situation here?
It's a quick enough run that you can't really get that sloshed by the end of it as long as you show up sober.
Yeah, you get a taste, and that's about it. Yeah,
plus, they have lots of redundant safety systems, which we don't have in America.
Yeah, that's true. Give everyone wine. The system is redundant enough. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's so true. Oh my God. Yeah, and also, there are people in the chat saying that, there are a few subway systems, like the New York subway has automated train operation. Yeah, like London Underground has lots of automated train operation. Like, lots of places have grade of automation too, and that's where essentially you've still got a driver, but they're only basically controlling kind of the doors That's quite common. It's quite straightforward to do that. It's fairly straightforward to implement signaling systems that achieve that for metro systems, but for passenger systems, but for like mixed traffic systems that becomes more of a no-no, and for freight long distance, no chance.
Yeah,
Anyway, right.
difficult to push a button at a yard in Los Angeles and say, take this train to Denver.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a thing. Right, let us press on to well, yes.
Well,
crikey.
This is Lac Mégantic.
Yeah.
Which
very
was
early at W2IP episode, actually.
Yeah, I think
very
it was episode 7 or so. Yeah, this is
way back.
Lac Mégantic, Quebec was I'm surprised this wasn't the big one, right?
Yeah.
Where we'd never talk about one-man crews again.
Yeah.
So essentially the main Montreal and Atlantic Railroad, they were a short line. Not a short line. They were a big short line, I would say.
Yeah.
And they moved to one-man crews because there are less labor laws around short lines. I think in Canada there were 2 lines which had one-man crews, one of which was the MMA Railroad. The other one is the Quebec North Shore and Labrador Railroad, which has a completely different operating paradigm that made it a lot safer. It also involved 10 days of wilderness training because it's so remote.
Yeah, okay, fair.
But I want to say the engineer tied down the oil train. This is a train full of crude oil.
Really nasty oil as well. Like,
exactly.
Really nasty stuff.
Yeah, that back in crude was bad. Very, 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 very flammable.
Leave it under the ground, folks. Just leave it there.
Yeah, exactly. I don't remember all the details. Obviously, we recorded an episode about it a long time ago. But it was a one-man crew situation, and he had to leave the cab of the locomotive because it had a mechanical problem. I think it caught fire, and the railroad was like, we have the fire department deal with it, and just go home, right? And so that's what happened. The fire department didn't have a lot of expertise with the locomotive, and so. Long story short, the air brakes failed, and it rolled down a hill, hit the town of Lac Mégantic at about 80 miles an hour or something, and blew up the whole town.
Yeah, like it completely destroyed. This is the sort of thing that community has been utterly destroyed. Like emotionally, as well as like the physical destruction. There's a town that's just had its soul ripped out, right?
The entire downtown is now a vacant lot, which is contaminated with benzene.
And all of the people who survived this their lives are ruined. Like emotionally, they're absolutely no amount of compensation, no number of Xboxes are actually going to recover the fact that's it. Their lives are totally ruined. They can't live a normal life. The soul has been ripped out of that community. It's just wild.
Yeah. So this is sort of. And this was supposed to be the big derailment that would, end discussions of a lot of this stuff, and it did not happen. The Class 1 railroads are still at least going to use the threat of one-man crews to try and beat down labor action and stuff like that, even though it's clearly, and you have issues with precision scheduled railroading management, saying you got to inspect cars faster. You got to do all kinds of crap, and there hasn't been the big one has not come, but there have been some near misses. I think another good example's on the next slide, which happened this year.
Oh yeah, God, of course, yeah. This happened near a place called. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't this happen near a place called Aberdeen?
Aberdeen, Maryland, yes.
Yeah, Aberdeen, near where I grew up, but not the Maryland one, the original.
So this is Norfolk Southern uses a small part of the Northeast Corridor, not a small part of the Northeast Corridor, a good part of the Northeast Corridor to run coal trains to compete. I have it in quotes, compete with CSX, and so they ran this train from probably Harrisburg, got on the main line at Perryville. Went a little bit further down the line, and then they put 20 coal cars on the ground, blocked the whole main line. Now, this is I cannot emphasize this enough, a 135-mile-an-hour railroad.
Yeah, this is the best of the best when it comes to railroad infrastructure in the US. And they put 20 cars on the ground and blocked it up in a way that would have caused absolutely untold destruction had they not basically been super lucky.
Yes, they got really, really lucky.
This would have been so
this-
bad. Oh my goodness, they could have easily binned 2 Acellas at once with this derailment.
Yeah, no problem.
at
Or like,
speed.
yeah, they got commuter trains there too. They
Yeah.
got like all kinds of crap. It was just incredible that this A, it was allowed to happen. B, it wasn't a bigger news story. I mean, this is one of the problems with like how many derailments you're getting these days is that
they passed out
they're
in
so
the news
common that it's like having a car crash. It's like, oh, okay. So this is sort of like the state of the railroad right now, and this is I know we got to bring it back to labor. This is why they got to win their demands, because otherwise
A whole bunch of people are going to die.
stuff's just going to keep getting worse.
Yeah.
And it's like there's got to be some philosophical change about how freight rail it runs, because otherwise you're not going to have a railroad in 5 years.
Yeah.
No one's going to want to work there because it'll just it's so bad.
Yeah. If you're working, notwithstanding all of the suffering that you've had, and the fact that you basically can't run not even a normal life but a functioning life, put that to one side. The fact that you're aware that there could be an enormous disaster, and that you're being forced to have working practices and run on railroads that are not maintained enough, and rather in this case run wagons that are not maintained enough, that you could be involved in a derailment at any moment. That's not, people are just going to be like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to go and get an office job playing with spreadsheets.
I don't want to kill 1,000 people in a derailment. I'm going to avoid that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, the railroad is its people. You do not run this system without skilled people. You can squeeze, you can twist, you can pull them apart, you can thin them out, you can sack them. But ultimately, railways here in the UK, in the US, in India, in China, in Russia, in Austria, all the places we've discussed in this episode, all of them, the single thing that makes them work is dedicated, skilled people, right? There's no getting around that. There's just no getting around it. Dedicated, skilled people. And if those people leave, you don't have a railroad anymore. And it's kind of getting to the point in the US where the railroad companies seem to be just like putting their hand on that door and looking at the workers and going, okay, then do it. Leave.
Yeah.
And the workers at some point are going to, they're going to say, okay, bye. I'm off. See ya.
I mean, there was a big hiring spree back in 2004. All those people are going to be coming up on 20 years in 2 years. And, I believe that's when you can start collecting your pension. So, I think they, if like 80,000 people leave the railroad, my God, the country will implode. And it'll all be railroad management's fault.
Yeah, I was going to say, the US, it's not like the railroads are... okay, it's nice that we have them, but actually our economy... No, very much... And it's the same in the UK. People don't really think of it, but rail freight, if you pull rail freight out of the way that the country works, it doesn't anymore. And that's even more the case in the US, right? Like, people think of the railroads as a sideline thing that's not that important, and everything's by highway. That's not true. The US absolutely lives... Like, very much the arteries are still the railroads, right? For the fundamental stuff that keeps the country actually functioning. Like, keeps power, keeps the lights on and all this stuff.
Gets the coal to the power plant, gets the gasoline to the fuel distributor. It gets the grain to the flour mill. It gets the chlorine to the water treatment plant. Yeah. It's like, okay, if this shit goes down, you probably got a week before real serious shit starts. Yeah. There was some industry association that was like, well, this strike could cause almost $2 billion a day of damage to the U.S. economy. And it's like, wow, you're putting a real cheap value on like human life there.
Yeah, like the entire population of the U.S., like 2 billion.
Like everyone gets cholera.
Yeah.
Within like a week.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, let's not entertain these times, because that's when the US starts looking a lot like Threads.
Starts to look like the UK.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I can promise you do not want that. So okay, right. So that's the last slide and the kind of the slide of pain. And I suppose I wanted to kind of round out, Justin, with, by the way, everyone in the chat, hello to all of you. Gareth, I know you've gone, Gareth Williams, many Gareths in the chat. Hello to, goodbye, Gareth. Everyone in the chat, thanks for following along. You've all been, there's 200 of you in kind of watching at the moment, which is awesome. Live. 200 live viewers is getting up towards the record for Rail now, which is cool. Roz, I thought I'd kind of... I've waffled there so you can see the slide. Did you see what I did there? Yeah. Do you think there actually will be positive change? Because there's got to be some hope out of this. Because the US does have the potential for an incredibly good railroad system, right? Yeah. If you spend 1 year's worth of railroad profits, you could do the things like redouble all the stuff that's been singled and electrify pretty much all the core routes. So do you think there's actually going to be any change? Like, what do you think?
I have an optimistic answer and a pessimistic answer.
Oh, God. Okay, let's start with the pessimistic one then. Let's do that.
The pessimistic one,
unfortunately, possibly that's current, the current trajectory, right?
Pessimistic one is I think there's not really going to be any serious change. I think they will be forced to make operational improvements just to give their workers a day off once a year, which is like if the railroad unions accept the current deal, that's basically what they'll get.
Which is why the most marginal improvement to their conditions.
Yeah, I think I also think the unions are going to they're going to strike it. They're going to strike the railroads, and they should do it. I think they have to do it. But they're going to have really bad press because of it. That's the other thing.
This is it. Like the whole, it's just like in the UK. The whole, and I don't like saying mainstream media. That's such an irritating generic term. But it is very much all of the kind of the establishmentarian media will absolutely. I'm not using that as a cop-out because plenty of people do write positive stuff and try and... But in the US, it's particularly bad. There's so much client journalism. The UK, absolutely the same issue. Both the US and the UK have this issue with client journalism. And there just will be this enormous establishmentarian push to villainize and absolutely denigrate all the staff, the workers. There's going to be so little cut-through of people telling a story that is anything other than, these workers are selfish and bad, and we all work really hard. Everyone has to take the cocaine to do the job. So why can't the rail workers? It's
more methamphetamines here.
Yeah, Jesus.
The roots of it are already there. Because there was such a huge media push when the strike was delayed that President Joe Biden, the most pro-labor president in history, has averted the strike, which he did not. The Presidential Emergency Board gave the most meager time off possible to at least get Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen and the other union, Sheet Metal something Rail Transport Union, to at least get the thing up for a vote. I think the rank and file is going to reject it though, and we're gonna have an actual strike, and you will see like MSNBC liberals being like, why don't they just take Joe Biden's recommendations? And then you're gonna have some insane shit from Fox News. Holy crap!
Yeah, it'll be like the full like these people actually should be hung.
Yeah,
all of them should be hung.
Yeah, they should. It's that shit's going to be. They're gonna like start trying to figure out the mental gymnastics about the woke liberal railroad workers.
Yeah. Oh my God! It will be like watching the gymnastics in the Olympics to see the Fox News anchors. Oh, that was a very gassy beer. Yeah. The Fox News anchors really bending over themselves to come up with weird ways that they're like the metropolitan liberal elite railroad workers.
Yeah, exactly. But we interviewed. We found the one railroad worker with blue hair to interview about something.
Absolutely. Like, this one's a woman. Oh my God. Yeah, Jesus. It's not going to be good.
We do have this to look forward to.
Yeah,
so the other I guess the pessimistic answer there is we'll get minimal change. I think we will get a little bit of change, but we're still on the bad downward trajectory here.
Yeah.
The positive answer is we have a much more aggressive M-track than we've had in a while.
That's a very interesting point. Yeah, okay.
Yes. So, for example, there's Biden passed the big infrastructure plan that has a whole like M-track expansion thing. One of them, a very basic one, they were going to run a train from New Orleans to Mobile like a couple times a day, I want to say. And this is a line that used to have Amtrak service but does not. They suspended it after Hurricane Sandy. They're going to try and bring that back. New Orleans has such a big, beautiful train terminal. They need a couple more trains there. Anyway,
yes, please.
So
Absolutely.
there's a bunch of Surface Transportation Board hearings about it, and CSX basically told the regulators point blank, like, well, they can't run trains there because we run too many trains there ourselves. We can't tell you how many there are because that's a trade secret, and that's commercially sensitive. Yeah. So, which Amtrak, after a couple months of these hearings, Amtrak just set up a webcam down there. And we found out the number of trains that are running on the line each day is 4. Now, granted, because they're all monster trains, it is actually very difficult to add capacity there for the Amtrak train. But also, like, it's CSX looked pretty bad from this one.
Good. So the idea of Amtrak embarrassing more of the Class 1s, that feels like a positive thing to me. More of that is good. And it does come back to your grand unified theory, which is if Amtrak gets more teeth and starts running... It's a little bit... Because, it's not right to compare the US... In scale, it's not right to compare the US to an individual country in Europe, right? Because... Right. It's the distances are much greater, which adds complexity because it greatly increases those error bars, doesn't it? Right, but it is fair to compare the US to pan-European rail services.
Yes.
At which point, the orders of magnitude maybe get closer, but Europe is still running. Like for example, Paris to Milan. That's a comparable service to the sort of service you get in the US. And there's still quite a few of those a day. Whereas in the US, that equivalent distance, you'd still be getting maybe like 1 or 2 trains a day, kind of tops. Okay, Northeast Corridor is different. That is much more of a familiar type of rail service. But outside of that, like the services that go long distance on Amtrak it's kind of like there's 1 a day.
Yes.
Which is, come on, that's not. And the reason that service is crap is as we see the last 3 hours. But it'd be nice if Amtrak got more bullish and really started pushing for. Actually, we'd like to run 4 trains.
Enforcing some schedule discipline. I think that's going to be a big factor. I also think if the unions do strike the railroads, which I think they should, I think the rank and file. I hope the rank and file override union bosses on this one. They're going to be forced to. The railroads will, I think, be forced to concede stronger time off benefits, and that's going to require them to run their trains better.
Yeah. So that's quite a realistic positive trajectory. I mean, it's not like you're not suggesting that there's going to be this is not going to be a tipping point to suddenly the US having a really effective railroad system like all of a sudden. It's not going to happen. But
probably not. No.
At some point we need to chat.
It should go on a better trajectory.
Yeah, hopefully maybe that might be steered into a better trajectory. At some point we need to talk about so in the UK, one of my theses is one of my hypotheses, me and John Stone certainly, is that we can't run a better service in the UK until we have more devolution. And it does seem a bit like that kind of applies in the US in terms of in relation to the kind of the municipal authorities, like the various city regions. So as they get more power, they potentially run better local services. But I don't know. That feels like another whole can of worms for us to open another day, right?
Yeah, I was about to say.
And it maybe doesn't apply in SEPTA's case. Maybe mixed feelings on that one. Given past that, but that's another subject. But no, Roz. I mean, we've had this is now a 2-hour 43-minute episode. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful, well-crafted machine. I love it. I've also just because we've got a couple minutes to close on. I've just opened another beer, which it's very US looking, the Brave Noise Pale Ale there, but it's actually weirdly and relevant to the last of your slides. Brewed in Aberdeen. It's an Aberdeen beer. So there you go. It's quite nice. Well, I don't know if it's quite nice. It smells nice.
I was actually going to go run and grab another one real quick.
Do it. Okay. I will tread water for the next 3 minutes. And answer some questions. In fact, you know what? I'll go big face while you do that. Hello, everyone. It's me in Big Face. Hi. Roz has just ran to get a beer. I'm drinking out of this Intercity APT beer glass, which is custom. These don't exist anywhere. You can't buy them. You can only create them yourself or have a lovely friend who sends you them for birthdays. But that's very nice. Everyone, send your questions in. So send your questions in now for Roz and me. Roz will return. Well,
I'm
by
back.
the sounds of it, Roz is back. That was the shortest ever break. I'm used to a longer break from Roz. You normally take the opportunity to use the restroom. You didn't this time.
Yeah, but I figured we're getting close to the end.
We
I can
are, it's
hold
true,
it.
yeah. It's 10 minutes. Anyway, but everyone in the chat, if you've got questions for Roz particularly, because let's face it, you don't have questions for me because I'm here every week. I've been doing these literally every week, bang on, every Wednesday since I started doing it. And this is the 133rd episode. I don't know how I've managed it. And thanks to everyone who's sticking with us for these 133 episodes. Maybe at some point I'll run out of content. It's not going to happen, though, because there's such a long list of requests of people wanting to do RailNat, like guest suggestions and stuff. I'm never going to run out. Also, there's always new news. Anyway, right, let's get rid of my stupid face and go back to... Let's get Roz back again. We've done that. Right. Well, actually, ironically, is the end. So we'll get to the Q&A momentarily, everyone. Starlight, that's not a fair question, which is, where's Franklin? No.
Well, I will say.
Oh, yeah, go on.
We finally got we have an editor for Well, There's Your Problem now. We have
what?
The wonderful Devin.
Oh, Devin.
Who is doing our editing now, which has freed up a lot of time for me, which maybe I could make use of by finishing up Franklin.
Franklin was a bit of an inspiration. I'll talk about Franklin in a minute, actually, because I do kind of have a weird sort of double flipped plug about Franklin momentarily. In fact, you know what? I will save it until I get to that slide. But I'll churn through some of the normal kind of ending bits first, then we'll get back there. But anyway, everyone, send your questions. So this is available in audio only format. I don't know how well we've audio described, but basically, Roz has the most incredible voice for radio. Anyway, by the fact that you're double faced, Roz is also he's a handsome guy. But everyone, you are renowned, Roz, for your voice.
I was about to say. I thought you were about to say I got a face for radio.
No, I flipped it right round. You're a handsome devil anyway. But no, you have. So people will have enjoyed your voice anyway. So they're being carried wonderfully through this. So everyone in audio only form, I hope you enjoy this. The standard plugs of, so I don't have the nice middle thing that I edit in. I do them at the end because I'm lazy and I don't like doing editing, hence why I do these live. This is kind of like the equivalent of getting Devin in. Shout out to Devin. Hi, Devin. This is the equivalent of getting Devin in, which is that I don't edit these because I do them live, which makes them easier. So that's also why it's 3 hours long. So patreon.com/GarethDennis is the Patreon where you can support me. You can get weird insights into how these things are made, and you can suggest things about future episodes. I've actually got some Patreon stuff coming up soon, actually, some Patreon only stuff. So shout out for that. Masket is on pause at the moment because they've gone to turf. So you can't get any merchandise at the moment. If you want to throw abuse at me, then you can do that via PayPal, paypal.me/GarethDennis. Throw violent words at me and the occasional £5 note. And the Discord, GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord is where you can join in to the chat that continues. Everyone's all the fun, all the faves are in there. Everyone's in the Discord server. Actually, Roz, I think you've possibly dipped into the Discord, even if you don't spend any time in there. I think you have dipped into the Discord server. So many people are in the Discord server. Yes. Many people are in and about there. Don't start pinging everyone because they will ignore you. No, you can ping me, and actually no one pings me in the server. It's very nice. Everyone's very polite in the RailNet server. Honestly, everyone in there is lovely. It's very nice. Right, enough of me waffling. Here is these lovely three. Also, yay Liam! Congratulations, Liam Anderson, you gorgeous hunk of meat. On engagement. Just a happy shout out to Liam. Hello, lovely Liam. I'm very much looking forward to seeing you soon.
I was at his engagement party, and they were having someone was having a wedding reception across the estuary, and they had live music. And anyway, our whole party was just screaming, "Free bird!" So that was a pretty good time. That was good.
It's lovely. Yeah, Liam and Rin, it's very exciting news. Very, very happy. I love that you continue to be represented by the Do Not Eat coin here, which is nice.
I was about to, well, someone drew it before I had a public face.
Yeah,
So-
that's it. No one knew who you were. And also, hi Alice. We had Alice on to talk about railway watches. And in fact, if I briefly... I'm wearing the watch that inspired the episode because I'm wearing the Swiss Mondaine railway watch. I can't rotate my elbow around because my arms don't work like that. But there it is. It's very nice. I enjoy it. Anyway, I digress.
Mine is still at June's house because June said she'd get the battery changed. And you know what? That has not happened.
Anyway, sorry, the reason I put this up is, of course, everyone, the last episode that went out, the last main episode on the channel was episode 113, Battery Electric Locomotives. A subject very close to my heart. I enjoyed watching it because we're having a similar sort of bionic duckweed chat in the UK about the battery and hydrogen. Also hydrogen, the idea that hydrogen trains are going to solve everything, which is fucking hilarious.
That's fake.
Yeah, Alan joined you, and it was an epic episode and very enjoyable. It was all the train content you want and need, folks. So go subscribe to. I mean, everyone watching this. Let's face it, literally everyone watching this subscribes to WTYP. So the Venn diagram there is a circle.
Gray hydrogen is more carbon intensive than gasoline. I
Yes.
want to say that.
Yeah. And also what's fun is, particularly in the EU, you look at how much the fossil fuel companies have been lobbying for hydrogen stuff. That should raise eyebrows at minimum. They've been spending hundreds of millions of euros a year lobbying the European Commission on hydrogen being wonderful. So that should be like a good reason to just absolutely reject the idea that hydrogen is anything other than a fringe application.
What are the copper and steel industries doing? I mean, come on, guys. Let's get some railroad electrification going.
Yeah.
Let's get some dishonest lobbying on.
Yeah, why is there never dishonest
on-
lobbying about electrification? Exactly. Why? Like there is serious copper production to be had in that front. Right? Oh man.
Do you own an unethical copper mine
Yeah.
in like South Africa? Come talk to us.
Oh, exactly. But also, and I've not listened to this yet. I am a Patreon subscriber, so I get the bonus episodes. I've not listened to this yet, but this is a fun one, which is Dr. M.R. Geldof has joined you for How to Die in a Sword Fight, which I'm absolutely intrigued by this. I have no idea which direction this bonus episode's going to go, but I'm looking forward to listening to it.
I was very drunk for that one.
Good. Marvelous.
As happens in our bonus episodes.
That does happen. Yeah, the bonus episodes are fruity. Yeah, so I had the pleasure of being in a bonus episode, and and it ended up getting opened out to everyone, didn't it? Because it was on. I kept saying Penn Central Station was the stupid thing that I kept doing. It's like, no, Penn Station. We did Penn Station. It was the Penn Station episode, and it was good fun.
That was a good one.
It was good fun, and I think I did get drunk. Anyway, right. I will plug my two episodes. We were talking about Franklin. Franklin was a bit of inspiration for me on a number of levels. Firstly, also, Dina's watched your. Dina and I have sat and watched on our telly your other series, your other mini series about planning and power and planning. Which it's quite good.
The power, politics, and planning, yeah.
Exactly. Dina really enjoyed it. She was like, I like this a lot. I'll watch more. And then we ran out of the episodes. But it was good. The parking one particularly made us both very angry and aggravated. It was excellent. But your Franklin episode kind of... Firstly, that means I know Philadelphia geography now. So that's good since I'm visiting. But also it inspired me to kind of do a longer series. And when I say longer, I mean, good God, there are so many hours of it. We're on episode 61 of the series in the Archipelago. And the next episode is going to be this Friday, I think. And it's Modernisation 2, Electric Boogaloo. We're going to be looking at the modernisation. So it's kind of like the UK-ish. Like, it's kind of analogizing the UK to kind of explore what happened in kind of British rail history, but also with kind of... It's currently a nice socialist idyll, our little collection of islands. So anyway, for people who are watching that series... Jay, I know Besquicklehausen, you're a big fan of the series you've been watching, and indeed have joined as a guest a few times. Next one's this Friday. And next week's
I didn't
Rail
know I
Matter.
could be a guest on that.
Oh, you can be a guest on that series. Basically, you just join in the Discord chat, and we just basically talk while I, I don't know, do whatever it is I do. Remodel a railway station, or I don't know, electrify 2 miles of railway. It's a very slow burn series. Actually, it's been the last episode was a bit faster, but it's a pretty slow burn series. But we're taking our time and exploring things. Anyway, I digress. Next week's Rail Natter it's going to be a pre-record because I'm meeting with basically the whole committee of the Young Rail Professionals to do like a big round table chat about skills, because it's Rail Week again. We've done one of these every year since Rail Natter started, and we're going to talk about like the skills gap and what the hell we do about that. I'm recording that one on Monday night, so that should be
skills. I heard you can put skills in a wallet now.
Well, exactly. Yeah,
that might help.
Skills wallet. You can buy those skills on the blockchain. Oh no, you can buy them with Bitcoin, and they are on the blockchain. Sorry, I'm getting my made up tech bullshit all confused.
All right.
Yeah. Right. So we're going to be talking all about the blockchain. Yeah, that's it. We're going to be talking about skills blockchain.
What if we put railroads on the blockchain? Has anyone thought of this before?
Well, I've always wondered. So I continue to have never heard a single useful application of the blockchain. And everyone who's explained it to me, I've responded to them saying, "What, you mean just a regular document control system? Like you can put your work documents on the blockchain, and that way no one will ever be able to edit them without your knowing about it, and there'll be a full auditable trail." To which my response was, "What, you mean like just a regular document management system that we've had since the 80s?"
What if you had an electric locomotive, but instead of the pantograph powering the traction motors, you also had a diesel engine on there, and the pantograph powers a bunch of Bitcoin miners, and the diesel engine drives the train. Has anyone thought of this? I think this is a good idea. We should look into it.
Copyright, patent pending.
Yeah, copyright. Yeah.
No, you must not actually take that. That's officially our idea.
I'm gonna go pitch this to Burlington Northern Santa
Fe. We've already established they're idiots. They will take you up on it. Oh my god.
Yeah. This is my secret plan to get the wires up.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's a strange.
What if the locomotive mined Bitcoin?
Oh my goodness! Right, I'm going to bring up now. This won't work because you will be a phantasm if I do it. Yes, there is just a gap. Justin Roczniak, but with a black hole where you were. This can work though. Oh, actually, you know what? I can make this work. I can do this in episode. We're gonna hit it's 2 hours 55, which means I've got enough time to make this happen. I'm doing it. Add existing RAWs, make source visible. There you are.
Yeah.
There we are. So I'm gonna do that. And
is it working?
It is working. And do this. There you are. There's this RAWs. There we are. So we have a chance for questions. I'm going to scroll up and look at some questions. We have got Timothy Meyer is asking, is there a way to deal with large precision scheduled railroad trains stopped over grade crossings blocking small towns other than not do PSR? Your thoughts, Roz?
I was just going to say, apparently my webcam was just delivered.
Oh, really?
But I'm not going to set it up right now because... This room is disgusting right now.
Also, as previously established, I can't get the OBS won't let me make this work, so we're gonna have to cope with what is you looking quite fetching in that City Skylines videos for Paradox from like 3 years ago or something.
Oh yeah, I look like shit right now.
You've got a nice shirt and jumper on and some nice denims in the
exactly.
And sitting in a really nice chair. Is that your house that they filmed that in, or did they like? What was the situation with that?
That's my living room, yeah.
Oh, that's actually... You have a nice living room. You have a really nice Coors Light, neon light in the background. It's nice.
That thing broke this summer, unfortunately. I don't know what's wrong with it. I'm sure it's fixable, but like I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah, that's... Yeah. In any case, that's a nice living room. Anyway, I enjoyed that video. It was good. It was. I particularly enjoyed the bit where you do the trains sort of... you talk about the fact that people want to listen to hear about trains. That was fun. That made me giggle when I first watched it.
That was a whole situation. That video. We brought the Finns over to, or no, I think they were Swedes. I don't remember if it was Paradox or if it was Colossal Order who came over. We brought them over to Oscar's Tavern, and after
I said Paradox. It's not Paradox. It's Colossal Order. I'm thinking of My Hearts of Iron 4. It's
Colossal Order is part of Paradox.
Okay.
Anyway, we brought the guys over to Oscar's Tavern, And a fight broke out at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. It was great.
Is this going to happen when I'm over? Is it going to be hell? So firstly, the first thing you should know is
yeah,
that
we're going to bring you to Oscars.
given the very exciting news, which I kind of hinted in last Rail Week to everyone, but Dean and I are expecting everyone. There we are. There's the exciting news for all the Rail Natter people. So I've not been drinking, hence why I've not been drinking beer in Rail Natter episodes, because in solidarity with poor Dina, who can't really drink, she can have a wine or two, but can't really drink much. I've been avoiding it. So Justin, you're going to get me drunk on one beer. So that'll be a nice. I'm a cheap date. What can I say?
There you go. And Oscars is the cheapest bar.
Perfect. Super cheap. Amazing. Yeah. So it's Oscars. Yeah, we're going to go there and see if Paradox are there, and we can fight some Swedes again.
Yeah.
Perfect. Nice one. Sorry. Anyway, we digress. Timothy, we didn't actually answer your question very well, but is there a way to deal with them? Probably not. No, I don't know.
What was the question again?
Just talking about blocking level crossings. Blocking small towns. Precision railroading trains stopped over the top of level crossings. I bet there's absolutely nothing you can do with that until PSR is scrapped.
Yeah, there's a great thing you can do, and it's run shorter trains more frequently on schedules where they don't have to stop so much.
Yeah. And also maybe invest in infrastructure. So if you've got a level crossing in the middle of a town, maybe build a bridge.
There's a town in Virginia. It's along the old Richmond, Fredericksburg, and Potomac, which has the railroad runs down the center of the main street, and there's like 50 trains a day. Ashland, that's the one.
Ashland, okay, yeah.
And there's there was a study that was conducted a number of years ago for high-speed rail between Washington, D.C. and Richmond. And when I say high-speed rail, I don't mean 225 miles an hour. I mean like 110 at best, because high-speed rail means nothing here. And, it's like you could do most of it with improvements within the right-of-way. And then the study got to Ashland and was like, they gave up for Ashland. They literally gave up. They were like, we don't know what to do here. And that's for future study. And it's I don't know. There's an abdication of responsibility here for like trying to make anything better.
Is it partly? So I've never done any work in the US, but I have done work in Canada, and one of the things I experienced in Canada was that there's definitely like a bit of a, and it happens in the UK to an extent, there's definitely a bit of a juggling act with avoiding paying, like the local authority has responsibility for certain bits, but they absolutely do not want to spend a penny. And then the regional authority or the city authority say, because obviously in the US you've got like city and then like count, the kind of the order of the devolution of power is kind of it can vary. And all of them are like, no, we're not paying for that, we're not paying for that, we're not paying for that. And but the thing I found, like, that exists in the UK, but in the US, when I was in Canada, the number of layers of that felt particularly egregious. I don't know, does that sound, from your kind of working experience, was that ever a thing in the US where you've got like loads of layers of different authorities all competing to not pay for the thing?
A municipality would never pay for intercity rail. You would not have that happen. They need that tax money for police.
I was going to say, they spend it on police, haven't they?
Regional authorities. I mean, I will say Virginia is better than most states on passenger rail because they are actively funding it, and it's been an incredible success. I mean, because they instituted the Roanoke train a couple years ago, which I use frequently, and they thought they were going to need a state subsidy of a whopping horror of horrors, $1 million a year to run it.
That's nothing for starters. That's like a sneeze on a spreadsheet. Like, that's just money.
Yeah. And the thing is, the train turned a profit.
It comes back to this thing we said at the start when I was talking about the COVID stats. There is actually, if you get the service right, even in the US, a place that is, let's face it, has like auto traffic flowing through its veins as a country. If you get the service right, there's enormous latent demand for people to use public transport, right?
Yeah, and the Roanoke train schedule is miserable, and yet people use it, including myself.
Yeah.
Because it leaves at 5 a.m. It gets back in at 9 p.m. at night.
But people are still using it. It's turning up the fact that
people
that's
use
turning.
It. Yeah.
Why are people not? Will Beresford, you've asked a good question, which I'll get back to. But I'm going to ask you this, Justin. Why do you I mean, this is a massive question, but maybe like quickly, do you think there's your grand unified theory might come up with the answer? Given that given that the services are so crap and still get used, has anyone within the railroad actually had the epiphany that if we ran a service that was better, there'd be more passengers? Like, has anyone within Amtrak had that epiphany?
So I would say Amtrak is very, very hamstrung by federal regulations.
Okay. Yeah.
A lot of like the really obvious routes they cannot run easily. You don't get federal funding for anything under 700 miles, for instance.
Oh. Okay. What?
But federal funding is reserved for long distance trains over 700 miles. So they got a big pot of money they can't use for anything other than long distance trains that are very expensive to run, and which have to run infrequently just based on the nature of the beast.
So that's almost the equivalent for anyone who's watching this who's not kind of familiar with distances. That's almost the equivalent of no subsidy being available for any trains running in the UK.
Yes.
None at all.
Yeah. Maybe you could run one.
Not even the Aberdeen to Penzance service is 700 miles.
You could run one up to Shetland and maybe make it work.
Build the long overdue Shetland tunnel,
or like
and then it would get
the Faroe Islands.
Yeah. That's wild. I did not realize that was the threshold. I thought it was. I don't know. I knew there was a threshold, but I figured it was a bit lower than that. 700 miles.
One of the crazy things that's happening right now is that the Northeast Corridor segment of Amtrak is actually making a bunch of money, which is sort of used to subsidize some of the long distance routes. But there were serious expansion plans before the big infrastructure bill that was passed, and they sort of. That's one of the reasons why the train to Mobile from New Orleans is. Why did I say Los Angeles? I don't like that.
That would be a nice service, though.
Yeah, the train from New Orleans to Mobile is going through Surface Transportation Board hearings right now, which is the successor to the Interstate Commerce Commission, is because they had the money to start doing real expansions before this bill went through, right? And they're looking at like routes that are economically viable, and this is one of them. There's a lot of people on the coast in Mississippi and Louisiana and even Alabama. You don't usually think of these as densely populated places, but these are the parts that are. And so this is where was I going with this?
You're describing the fact that there is an appetite within Amtrak to expand, but they're kind of constrained by the levels above.
Yeah, exactly. They've been very, very, very constrained. And the other thing is, of course, we've turned the relationship between railroads, freight railroads, and passenger railroads is much more adversarial now than it used to be. So this is that is part of the grand unified theory of rail operations, right? And we've
strengthened the passengers and
we've
the
turned
freight.
this. But we've turned this into an entirely adversarial relationship, which is bad for everyone. But it's people at Amtrak want to improve service. They just are not able to under the regulatory environment and the legal relationship between freight rail and passenger rail.
That felt like a shortcoming of the big infrastructure bill. Is it doesn't seem to be tackling any of that. Like there's value in providing extra infrastructure to get a better service, and then maybe that adds a bit of weight behind Amtrak against the freight operators. But ultimately, it feels like there was a lack of political will to actually engage head on with the class ones, right?
Yeah, there absolutely is not a lot of political will to engage. If you wanted to tackle this head on, I mean, okay, so like there were 28 daily trains between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh in the 40s, right? And today there's one, and there's barely any less infrastructure. And in order to run a second Amtrak train, Norfolk Southern's trying to extort like $300 million out of the federal government. If you wanted to, you could tackle these problems by telling the freight railroads
to go fuck themselves.
stop being stupid idiot dumbasses. Run shorter and more frequent trains. I've been convinced that, you know, it's a very blunt instrument, but a federal train length mandate would do a lot of good.
Okay. So back to our slide with the 75 versus 150 cars. Limit to 75. Just drop that limit straight in. You know, arbitrarily.
No.
Using that example.
You have to do a distance length, not a car length, because if it's a car length, they're just going to figure out how to make a half a mile long train car.
Okay, sorry, forgive me, I misunderstood. So actual distance, like a distance the train goes. Okay.
Yeah, like if you know, the train can't be more than 1 mile long.
Yeah, got you. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, got you. Yeah. So, right, Will, we're going to get to a question, which is a good question, I think, which is about back to the unions, because this was ostensibly about the US rail strikes, this episode. How radical are the US rail unions, and have they got enough morale for a sustained fight if it lasts more than sort of 1 or 2 strike days?
BLET has historically been very conservative.
Okay.
I am not very certain about the rest of the unions. I know there's one which has, I think, 2 now that have accepted the Presidential Emergency Board recommendations, and then there's one which has explicitly rejected it. Mm-hmm. BLET certainly has radical factions in it. There's been a sort of rank and file committee that's been formed, the Railway Workers United, which is pushing for some more radical solutions. It's or pushing for more radical action. I mean, it's an interesting one, because if Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen is threatening the strike, you fucked up. This is I would definitely say a paradigm of business unionism since, you know, well, they're the oldest railroad union in existence, and they were almost superseded by the American Railway Workers Union back in the late 1800s. That was Eugene Debs' union, I want to say, which weirdly a predecessor organization to Democratic Socialists of America, if you really trace it through some weird things. But yeah, BLET is generally a pretty conservative union, but I think if they're trying to, if they're withholding their labor power over this, they mean business.
Yeah, correct. It's a bit of like a tipping point for some, but little c conservative, by the way, folks, as in guarded over really pushing their power because they fear the risk of retribution, essentially, right? That's a fair representation of their position, right, Ross?
You know, you have factory workers and stuff like that in America are not necessarily. There's a lot of these old unions. You have people who will have, you know, "Let's Go Brandon" stickers on their cars and stuff like that. And, you know, the thing you got to do there is like just support labor.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the "Let's Go Brandon" sticker, or like the, you know, the Blue Lives Matter Punisher sticker that you're seeing. You gotta just support labor.
Push through that and just support labor. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. GDR Riley says that they're a fan of a train that must fit in 95% of the sidings along a given route. That seems like a reasonable sort of. I mean, I'd go for 100%, right? If you could.
I'd go for 100% too. Yeah. Or I double track the railroad.
Yeah, I mean, they've got the thing is, it doesn't stand up that there isn't the money to do it. We're going to finish in a minute. Don't worry, Justin. We're going to let you escape because this has been going for 3 hours quarter. Sorry, well, basically, I enjoyed chatting to you. Forget the lovely lot who are in the chat. I just enjoy a chat with you, and we haven't had a good long chat. But this is the chat we're going to have in the pub in however many weeks it is that I'm coming over.
Yeah, and then someone will try it. Then we can watch a fight happen. I'm excited for.
I'm excited for that. Who fights each other? Who are the people? Just people fighting each other.
It was just a fight broke out. I don't even remember what it was.
You're not doing a great job. You're not doing a great job of busting the idea that I'm going to arrive in the US with my funny sort of weird hybrid Scottish accent, and everyone's going to think that I sound all funny, and then there's going to be a generic like bar fight with people sliding along the bar and going out the window and stuff like that. You haven't busted this for me yet.
No. People are going to like you. It's other people are going to fight other people. No one's going to fight us. We're not going to be like the victims of the fight.
Are we going to be sat enjoying? Are we going to be sat with a drink watching the fight go on around us?
Watching the fight go on around us. Yes,
I love this.
That's the sort of vibe I'm trying to convey here. That's what we got. That's what we got. The folks from Paradox.
I'm just imagining you and a bunch of Swedes. Oh my, they're really going for dirty, and then just like I don't know why I did that weird Canadian accent there. I don't know what that was.
It's got some Minnesota Norwegian there.
Oh man, don't let me get.
Oh yeah, they're really going at it.
Oh, they're really going at it, aren't they? Yeah. Anyway, right, that feels like a good time to depart. Right, let us return. In fact, yeah, right. Make sure I've got all my stuff set up. Roz, it's been an epic episode, but I would have expected nothing less. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Honestly, a genuine pleasure. Your static placeholder version of you, looking in exasperation at the situation going on here. That was honestly, that was great. That was a really good explanation. We broke down into quite a few fun things there. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. I don't know what I'm not going to content churn when I arrive. I'm going to have a relaxed holiday because it's going to be like the last holiday before Dean and I knuckle down to the process of making a human exist.
Yes.
But it's going to be fun. But I might ride the SL and we might do some fun stuff and I'll do some tweeting, I'm sure. I need to work out how to make my phone work in the US. I have absolutely no idea how to do that. That's a future thing. But anyway, in the meantime, Roz,
you got the right spot in Philadelphia. You can access most of the Northeast Corridor.
Oof, I know. I'm looking for. It's going to be exciting. The Hell's Gate Bridge. Here I come. Roz, I will see you in a few weeks. But in the meantime, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much, everyone in the chat. Thanks for sticking with us. A few of you have been here since the start, since 3.25 hours ago. Jamie P.
Many moons ago, when these old oaks were young.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, back when they planted the trees to use for the latest version of the Notre Dame that's burned down.
Yes.
When this episode started. Roz, thank you so much. Everyone in the chat, Roz and I are waving vigorously to you. We will see you I will see you in a week's time. Roz will see you for the next Well There's Your Problem podcast. Go subscribe if you haven't already, but all of you have already, so that's fine. But if you haven't, for the two of you who haven't, go do it now. And Roz and I will see you soon. I will see you soon. Roz will see you soon. Cheerio, everyone. Cheerio. Roz, stay on the line because I'll say goodbye to you in the Skype while the credits roll. But anyway, because I forgot to tell you that earlier. Anyway, everyone else, bye. 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 Bye.